Hello everyone and welcome to the latest episode of It's Just Not Your Day, the Conqueror's Blade podcast, where this week we're going to be talking to Thorkell and MarkofGee about the casting experience within the game. Now this is going to be very much focused around tournament play, but also an opportunity for listeners to learn how to get into casting, and then some of the improvements that we'd make to the current casting experience and the way the tournaments are currently presented. And yeah, let's dive straight into it. Mark, could you please introduce yourself?
I'm MarkofGee, guys. I've been playing Conqueror's Blade for a fair amount of time, about 6,000 hours or something into the game, and obviously been a caster for CBR and CBL, as well as obviously playing in big high-level houses throughout the whole time, from the NA server to also the EU1 server as well. So yeah, that's pretty much me. Obviously a streamer as well on Twitch.
For this part, I'm saying is the same. I'm streaming on Twitch too. I've been playing to the game since season 10 only. I came a little bit late compared to other veterans, but I've played a lot, maybe too much to the game. And I've commenced the season 2, 3, 1 to 3 of the CBR Rivals, and I've commented in English too. I've commented the CBL, the last CBL. But the difference is that I'm commenting in French, and I'm managing the CB Rivals FR channel with Matchin sometimes and Arcanap when they're commentating. They've commented the CBL Asia too on the channel, so it's pretty interesting.
Right, gents, we start off most of our podcasts with asking, what do we think a veteran is? What do you think a veteran tournament player is?
In my eyes, I think a veteran tournament player is probably somebody that's obviously played in multiple different tournaments, not just the obviously the CBL, we've got one, but people that have also done different scrims and different tournaments that have been held by the community and stuff as well. So they're obviously getting different opponents to play on a regular basis, people that have managed to work their way through not just the first round as a team, and like maybe ones that have played together as a group tend to be the more veteran kind of side of players. They also seem to be the more experienced players in the game as well, for the most part. The ones that are the veteran players, they seem to be the ones that are really dedicated to playing, and they'll put in the effort, that are playing scrims week in, week out with other teams and other players alike that are trying to progress every single time and make the tournaments obviously more of a competitive side, which is a great thing to see.
Clearly, I think that for the veteran players, that's the people that got a lot of experiences in the game as a solo player for the beginning, and after they put a lot of time and effort to play some scrim, as say MarkofGee, because there is only training that can improve the play on tournaments, because you can be as good as you want in tournaments. If you don't have any team play, if you don't follow the call of your shot caller, you will be destroyed by even middle level teams. So it's very important to have a synergy between players.
I think for me, yeah, I think if we're saying what is a veteran tournament player, I don't think it's necessarily just what they played. I think it's also how well they placed as well, to a certain degree. Because I think if you're just, for example, you're just the team that always comes last place, I wouldn't class that as a veteran tournament player, because you're not improving, you're not really doing anything if you're always coming in last place. I think you have to have some sort of progression in a way to be classed as a veteran tournament player. I think there's got to be some sort of level of actual where you finished in there as well.
I think that's why I was saying, like obviously if you are taking part in every single one, obviously you need to kind of progress if you're winning games and back and forwards and stuff. Then obviously you're going to be more experienced to win and lose. There's no point in just losing. You're not really an experienced player at that point. But
I definitely think you've got to be across multiple tournaments as well. You look at all the teams that we have that are at the top at the moment, and they've all, I think without exception, they've all been in multiple tournaments, finishing in high positions in different teams, regardless of what it is, and they're all at that top level. The likes of, obviously we had Plebs. I'm going to talk about myself because Plebs was great. I was the best. But then you've got the likes of like No Beaches, Odin's Legion, all those guys as well, and obviously Buddy, that's coming up with a mix of a lot of Plebs players and a lot of the old veteran players as well. They have that experience across multiple different tournaments, competing at that high level, and that's what makes them a veteran tournament player for me.
I agree.
Is there a couple of things that distinguishes a veteran Siege player versus a veteran tournament player?
I think the veteran tournament player, the big difference between veteran tournament and veteran Siege player is just the team play, right? Because in Sieges, you could have played thousands of hours of Sieges, but if you're playing by yourself or maybe one or two people, you're not going to have that same level of coordination, that same level of communication that you have in those big tournament teams. And I know we said it before, Plebs' communication was horrific. It was just a big bundle of mess, but it worked for us. There's just a lot of noise there. But if you're playing in Sieges, you're not going to have that. You're not going to have that experience. So you could be a fantastic Siege player, and then you come to a tournament team, and it's like, eh.
Yeah, I think Sieges is different as well. Yeah, it's completely different.
I think one thing for me is that you had some teams that used to recruit players from Sieges, right? So they would see a good player in a Siege, they recruit them to the tournament team, and then they didn't. I don't think they really accomplished what they were hoping they would do, because I think it's a very different mentality going from Sieges to tournament play. Obviously, it shows a certain level of skill, but then you've got to move into that more, again, just communication and that teamwork sort of coordination style. And I say it a lot, but communication and coordination are two of the biggest things for me in a tournament team. Because you can have the best players in the world, but if they're not playing well together, then you're not going to do full.
Yes,
What do you guys think?
I agree with it because honestly, I think in Siege I'm a veteran player, but last season because I have starting a tournament with only casting, I decided to participate on the CBL rivals with Golem Life in second division. And clearly, in tournament, I'm a beginner. I'm not a veteran at all. I'm veteran as a spectator, as a caster maybe, but as a player, when I'm going to a tournament, I'm just a random player. I'm not a veteran player of Siege. It's clearly useless because, as say Temple, the communication, the fight, there is you're able to follow the lead. There is a lot of timing in tournaments. Just having 2 or 3 seconds late can just end a fight completely for just because of one player, and it's very important. And when you're Siege, there is another aspect. I think it's most of the time you're playing against players of your levels because there is a little bit of MMR in the game, I think. So there is a lot of people thinking they are very good in the game, and it's not the fact because they're making good games in Siege, but they are not good. Sometimes they're going against a big lobby and they've been destroyed completely. They do nothing. And in tournaments, you don't have it because it's always the best level. So you're gonna hit some walls. You're gonna play against some veterans that are smurfing. It's been the case of 1 or 2 teams in CB rivals because there were disbanding of teams. And you're gonna be against big walls, and it will be very hard to play against them.
Yeah, I agree with that as well. Like in terms of Siege, I think because you're only you can maximum 5 people in a Siege, right? So you can only really, if you might even be a group that aren't even in a voice communication with each other. So if you're just a group of 5 playing against each other, you're not going to have any synergy whatsoever throughout the whole Siege. Myself, I pretty much play Sieges on my own for the most part because I don't know when I'm on and when I'm not on. So I'll just jump on, play a few games, and I'm away again. So for me, I think you could play as many Sieges as you want. Doesn't mean that you're going to be great in a tournament setting. And like you said, Tempo, if obviously you took a few people in from Sieges because they played well, but yeah, they're playing individual, they could be great players. But yeah, working together, I think your best synergy you're going to get is if you compare your teams from a TW setting, because they're kind of on a more closer side than the Siege, because you've got obviously Sieges are a mixed bag of both teams. You don't know who's in what team. They're different regions. They're not in any communication. But obviously in TW you're going to have a full 15, but you've got extras and you've got a little bit more you can use than you do in a tournament setting. Like I've played in a tournament myself with Immortals. But I wouldn't say I'm an experienced thing because Immortals only think they lasted that 1 season or maybe 2 seasons they did in CBR. But we did get a couple of wins, which was good. And then I wasn't at the bottom of the leaderboard, so I'm not that experienced, but I can survive long enough to get good scores on the board. But I wouldn't say I was an exceptional tournament player because I've never really had that experience. I've obviously been casting quite a bit and watching what everybody else does and what other teams are doing. But I'm not in their voice comms and I'm not hearing what they're doing. So I'm just going from what I can see.
We'll come back to that point that you just raised there, which is how it looks for a new team versus how it looks for a veteran team. But the reason that you know what it looks like is because you do your casting. And that is why we've got you on today. Could you both just take a couple of minutes to kind of explain why you started casting and essentially your experience with that?
I think for me, the CBL, there was their first ever tournament that they did that I actually watched. I wasn't a caster, I can't remember who it was. I think they had a few people that got asked, like Evil Laws, and it was one of the first people up there to be asked to do that. And I watched it, and then I kind of had to speak to the community manager. I spoke to him and was like, oh, if they ever do another kind of tournament, I'd be interested in doing it. But instead, I think CBR kind of started up, and I was asked to do that. So I agreed to do CBR for the first season 0 it would have been, and really enjoyed doing that. And obviously that got me into doing a wee bit more for the couple of seasons with CBR. And then I then moved on to doing CBL when the next one came up. And because I've watched a lot of different casting things, I watched different competitive matches throughout League of Legends, and you've got different things like Call of Duty, which is kind of the one that I used to watch religiously. Every Call of Duty I'd watch, so I'd always watch casters and listen to what's been said. And I was always like, oh, you know what? I sit and watch sports as well. For example, I watch them in the commentaries and stuff, and I kind of just enjoy it, and it just naturally comes out when I'm watching a game. I'll say something, and then the commentators are about to say the same thing, so I'm just like, well, you know what? I'd probably like to try that out. Try to cast or commentary, whatever you want to class it as, because obviously they're kind of slightly different. But yeah, I thought I'd get into it, and then really enjoyed it because I played the game that much. I kind of know a good bit of knowledge about the game, not as much as Tempo does, because obviously he's playing in sort of all these different scenarios there. He's leading teams and knowing what to do in strategies. I could follow strategies, but for the most part, yeah, it's been good to kind of share my knowledge over the cast as I'm watching.
For my part, I decided to go cast games because I was playing Conqueror Blade a lot. I was streaming, making siege, and it's always the same at the end because you have to play the meta. You're finished by doing the same thing. So one day I was looking at the stream on the game. I see there were a tournament in French. I think it was commanded by an old content creator. And I say, oh, it's interesting. I didn't know the tournament at all because I was in not a big house. And I say, it could be interesting to do the same thing because I was listening to the commentary. I say, oh, I can do the same thing. I can manage a stream. I can talk this way. I can explain what to do. It's running on the game, and I say, oh, I'm gonna MP CB for the season 1. I haven't done the season 0 because it's what I saw on stream. I see the CB Rival season 0. I asked to do the commentary, and I start with season 1. I've been only on the Division 2, and after CB decided to create a CB Rivals channel. And so he asked us to create CB Rivals FR1. So I manage CB Rivals FR1 since this date, and it's all I finished on the casting for my part. It's just because I would like to explore all the aspects of the game because I enjoy a lot this game, and I would like to know all the parts. There is TW, there is Siege, and I think the last thing and the most interesting, if you're very interested to Conquer Blade, is the tournament. Because tournaments regroup everything, very technical, and all the synergy, and it's literally it's the best thing of the game if you're interested clearly inside of it.
And that's part of the reason I was so interested in it as well. Obviously, I've been playing tournaments for quite a while now, but I got into it because it was just something else to do. At that point, there was, I've been playing this game for a long time now, and that was just felt like the next step for me. But then going into casting, obviously, I started picking up casting a bit this season, or this last season of Rivals, just because I wanted to do something different. Obviously, Plebs had come to its sort of conclusion with winning the CBL. There wasn't anything else for us to do, and we'd already expanded before that anyway, so that was just like our final hurrah sort of thing. I wanted something different to do. I didn't want to make another team again. I ended up actually kind of running a team again in the end because things happened. The leader dropped out, whatever. We won't go into that, but it was just relaxing, just playing in a team, not practicing. But then doing the casting was just something different for me, and I thought I could bring something to it as well. Because nothing against the guys that are currently doing it, you guys are doing a fantastic job, but you don't necessarily have the highest level of like the strats and everything that someone like me would have coming from that running a team for so long at the top level. So that's what I wanted to try and bring to it, was a bit more in-depth knowledge about certain things or why teams would do certain things that maybe you guys didn't have. And obviously everyone knows I like to talk. Casting is about talking and keeping people engaged. I like to think I'm good at that. So yeah, it felt like the next step for me. And ultimately my goal is to get into the CBL and start casting that. That is ultimately my goal, which I wanted to do this time, but obviously I was competing in it this time, so it didn't really make any sense to cast as well. So I'm hoping I can, if they do another one, I'm hoping I can get in on the casting on that as well. But just picking up on one thing you said, Thorkell, I think one thing that Rivals does really well is having those multiple languages in the casting of it. I mean, you've got the French one, which is their standard. You've got the English one. They're not as active or not as regular, but you have had you've had German, you've had Spanish. Was there Was there a Russian one at one point as
English,
well?
Russian.
Uh,
They're thinking
for
of Turkish and Arabic as well.
Yeah.
for the Division 1, for the feudal one, there is only English, French, and Dutch, I think, for German. But for the Division 2, excuse me, because it's Dutch. I speak German too, so it's my bad. And for the second division, there is all the language you just said, and it's
Yeah.
amazing because everybody, if you want to interest yourself, you will understand easily a second division match because it's clearly more near the level you got in Siege, because sometimes there is new teams, so it's very easy to understand for debutants, for beginners.
The only down thing I would say is that it's not as regular, if that makes sense, in regards to the different languages. Just because it's a fan-made tournament, people can't always give their time to it, so you don't always have those other languages streaming. But you still have the coverage of it, and when they do then have that time and availability, they jump on, which is still fantastic. But I still think for a free tournament made by fans, what they've done with the casting, with the different languages, and everything is fantastic.
What would we say the entry requirements for you guys to be casters would be?
Who do you mean? In terms of like what would get us into doing it, or
Well, get a new player.
people to get
Get a new person
caster?
to start casting. Because for me, it's an interest. If they've got an interest in the
Yeah,
game and they want to give it a go for it. So
It's
what do they
it's
need?
definitely an interest. I think CB, from my experience, is quite open to letting people cast if like on their own channels. Makes sense. If you're going to go on the main channels, like the actual rivals channels, then you need a bit more experience. You need some sort of you need to be known, I guess, in the community a bit because you need to have that reputation. Because he's not just going to let anyone just jump on there. But I think if you're doing it yourself, I think almost anyone can do it as long as they just have the passion to do it, right? I think it helps being like a content creator or a streamer already because then you have that kind of attitude of being able to talk to no one, if that makes sense, because it's not a skill that everyone has, just being able to sit there and talk at a screen while you're doing stuff. So that definitely helps. But yeah, just anyone with a passion. We've seen that in Rivals already. There's been a lot of new casters that have come in that even if fairly unknown in the community, they just go, I want to do it, I want to help out, and then they end up becoming part of the team, and they start doing their stuff.
Yeah, definitely. I think that if you don't have an interest in the game per se, then you're not going to really have that energy and that love for obviously casting it. You might be wanting to do it for other reasons, whether it's obviously for your own specific benefit for channel wise or whatever maybe. But yeah, if you are interested and obviously you love to even just like you said, if you're a streamer or content creator or whatever per se, and you have that knowledge of just like speaking away to maybe nobody. That could obviously be the case to start with. But obviously just getting a constant flow of chat, constantly keeping like everybody that's maybe watching interested into it, and then obviously it gets you better speaking on the mic overall, kind of commentating on what's going on. And then if you're obviously the more knowledge you have of the game, obviously is going to suit better for a caster as well. So it's no point in if you're never played the game and tried to cast something, it becomes very difficult to explain to anybody what's happening, and then you'll probably just get slated for saying stuff that makes no sense to anybody because they know the game inside out that are watching. So
We have had some of that in the past.
I can imagine
some casters, yeah. One thing I would add as well, though, is that I think it's a little bit different just to normal streaming because normally there is a delay for these tournaments, so you can't directly interact with the chat, and so you'll see things like 2 or 3 minutes later, and you're like, I've already covered that, but I've seen that there. Okay, good. And you've got to try and keep the people engaged without actually being able to directly communicate with them, if that makes sense, because they can't talk to you at the same time.
It's what I was going to say. If I get some tips to give to people, if you would like to cast, I encourage people to cast like with another people. It's very good to cast like being 2 or 3. 3 is very the maximum because sometimes you have to keep everybody talking. But being 2, I think it's really the basis because if you're alone, it's very hard because there is the chat delay, and you will be talking alone because you will be answering to the question like 3 or 5 minutes later, so you have no interaction with the chat. It's really talking alone, enjoying the game and giving content to other people. And if I got another tips to give is it will bring from to something that Sample said before. It's interest yourself on the technical aspect of the tournaments, on the technical aspect of the game, because you can play a lot of Siege, you can know all the units, but you have to know the synergy between the units, the meta, everything. And it's very interesting to know those technical aspects. A lot of casting don't know it, and it's very sad. And it's what I try to bring as I can, because I'm not as veteran as Temple is, because he got all the tournament experiences, and I've been casting the tournaments. And after my first season casting the CBL rivals, I'm saying, okay, I'm now up to talk. I got still to improve, because you're improving each time you're casting. But I want to bring the technical aspects that I don't find sometimes. I want to understand the game and to help people understand the game at the highest level, and it's very important. And I'll be asking, and sometimes I'm streaming and casting with Machin, which is who is the captain of Nobichi. So it's one of the best player like Temple, knowing a lot of things in the games. And most of the time I'm casting when he is playing. I'm casting with Arcanopi, which is like one of the best friends. They're always talking about strats, so they're knowing everything on the game. So they're very technical, and I'm just like managing the stream, doing the social stuff, and I'm just hearing, and I'm enjoying listening to them, because it's very technical and enjoyable to understand.
Yeah, I think that's definitely something that has been needed in tournaments. And if you look back at some of the earliest CBLs, I'm not going to name names, but there were certain casters that would be like, why are they running units like that? Like, why would they play that? And then I'm like messaging them afterwards, because I've watched it afterwards, messaging me like, just so you know, this is the reason why these units are played. This is why this is done, because they don't have that, or at that point, they didn't have any experience competitive wise. They were just there to cast and add some color and things like that. And that just happened a few times in the early CBLs with some of the casters. But overall, I think it's a hell of a lot better now than it used to be.
Sorry, yeah, I think for the exact same thing, like the last couple of podcasts as well that you were speaking, obviously with CB last one, you mentioned it a few times about casters. There's obviously stuff in saying that, like you said, color casters. You've got a lot of them in terms of like the CBL, but no really technical kind of casters. And I think if you have teamed up, for example, like a technical and a color caster, so somebody's commenting on certain parts of it, does make a massive difference. And you'll see that in other competitive games where you do have that thing where they're constantly feeding off of each other pretty much, and you've not got two people butting in to try and say the same thing or not paying attention. You've just got like one that's there for kind of the hype of it, to keep everybody interested, and obviously the kind of throw and fun part of the game. And then you've got the person that goes and explains what's happened, why it's happened. Obviously makes a massive difference. And also for the viewers, it's more interesting for them, because they get to see and they'll hear what somebody that's technical and knows all about it, what's actually happened and how it's happened. So that maybe helps other players to progress and then build their team, or like start practicing because you've said what it is, you know what I mean? So like that also helps. And I think with Ghost X, I think you said similar things in terms of the tournaments, about how it's all about your communication with between you, and obviously that helps with everybody to kind of watch and as a viewer to enjoy.
If I get to bring something up on it, if you would like to cast matches on Conqueror tournaments, people making tournaments make it for free, so they are very invested people on the community. So don't hesitate to ask them. If you ask them to help them, or you ask them for questions about technical stuff, everybody will answer you. All the veteran players like Temple, I think, Machin, if you're asking them questions with respect and with good way to ask them, they will answer you, because all the people playing tournaments are passionate on the game. It's very technical. I think there is some get like a book, like you get some paper. United States got a book of plays. There's something on the maps, what they're supposed to do on certain maps. They know everything, so just ask to them, because if you're not playing tournaments, you don't know it. I got the experiences because I wasn't playing tournaments, so I get no experience on it. But if you ask them, you interest yourself, you will know what's probably gonna happen before the game happen. And it's very interesting, because just seeing the units people are taking, the bans, because there is some bans on the games, you can know approximately, and you can prevent what's gonna happen in the game. It's very important on the cast too.
Yeah, that unit ban pick phase, I would say 90% of the time, you know what the outcome of the game is going to be just from the ban and pick phase. Like that heavily impacts it so much, and you can see how teams are going to play from just that ban pick phase. And yeah, definitely. I've had people in the past that have messaged me asking for help on stuff, whether it's tournaments or even more sort of territory war style as well, because obviously I've had that experience in Origin with leading raids and things in the past. But I've had people reach out to me for help. I'm happy to answer questions for people. So yeah, feel free.
Yeah, we touched upon like color caster, play-by-play, technical caster there. There's in other game communities, so let's take Dota, League of Legends as examples. You've got play-by-play casters there that are not elite level. They've never been at the highest rank possible. But then the color casters often are players that have played at the high level, ex-pros that are coming in and they just know what's going on there. So play-by-play, from my understanding and talking with CB, is something that a lot of the community haven't or aren't looking to try and do. And I think this is where the game is quite interesting as a community. And Thorkell, you mentioned this early on, which is people are maybe stomping at low-level sieges, but then when they actually compare at a tournament level, they might not have the experience, might not have the knowledge to actually understand what's going on, and therefore you get calls like, "Oh, why have they chosen that unit?" Play-by-play is something that is hard, but people should be giving a go. And I think when people do solo casts, so I see Mark, you've done casting where it's literally just been you, and you're trying to do both play-by-play and color. It's really difficult. So getting that pairing. If you've got a friend that is interested in doing it, I know Ruffle does this. Ruffle will reach out to a couple of people and say, "Do you want to join me on the stream?" And then they'll basically riff off each other. And I think one of my favorite ones for this season was on the Hidden City maps. In the Rustic division, you had one team that brought 10 units of Javs, and the defenders had absolutely no idea what to do with it. And the commentators were having a whale of a time, and they made it so much fun because they were literally just riffing off each other, saying stuff like, "Please help, send dudes. We need help, send dudes." And that kind of stuff will ripple through, and people will enjoy it. And I remember it, other people remember it, and it's how this thing creates a legacy, and then people learn these new strats and stuff. So I think more people should get involved if they are interested, but do it with friends because it's a really good one.
I think just bouncing off that, I think that definitely does help, especially just in having multiple people there, it makes it a lot better. But when the casters are having fun and enjoying it themselves, that makes it so much more fun to watch. Like some of my favorite clips from just tournaments in general are where, like, you know, teams have jumped off the wall, for example, for a kill, and the casters are just laughing at it, and that just makes it so much more memorable because they're just having fun. They're watching. It's like, "Oh my god, look at what they're doing!" And then everyone just gets really hyped into it, and that makes it so much more fun for everyone else. Like everyone watching, everyone taking part in it. You've got the memories afterwards. Like when the casters are actually enjoying it in that moment, it's great because there have been casters in the past that just like, "Okay, so now they're going up. Yep, they're doing that. Cool. Yeah, yep. Okay, it's over there. Yep, cool." And that hasn't been for a while. It's a lot better than that, but that's how some were at the start, and it's not fun to watch.
And that clearly something I get to say, you won't be perfect at the beginning. I've been casting like 3 seasons of CBL Rivals. I've casted the CBL. I'm still learning, and what we're gonna say today, it's what we know from all the seasons we have done casting. Because at the beginning, always we said, "I've done it. I've done all the stupid stuff. I've cast sometime 4 hours alone. It's awful. That's why I say to cast with someone else. I know that you have to take the technical stuff, and one of the stuff you have to know, it's trying to not cut the speak to other people because it's very hard with Discord. When you're hyped by the tournament, you want to say something because it's very interesting. You're on it, but it will be difficult. I got some problem with it, not cutting the speak sometime. And the CBL, it was way worse because it was in English. So sometimes I just, because I was a little bit stressed, I just speak all the time. And it was not good for the beginning. But the last match I cast, it was with MarkofGee. And I got to say something, like say Temple. If you're happy and it's you bring just like a human stuff, not being a robot, it's very enjoyable. The last match I've done in CBL was with MarkofGee. I was just zen. The match was very good. And it was just perfect to cast. I've cast another one with Nightfinger. It was very technical. He is very good caster too. But I was stressed, and I honestly, I think I fucked up a little bit the cast because I was stressed and I was cut in the speak sometime. And it was very sad because I've taken the experience. Next time I know it because I knew it, but I need 3 matches to remark and improve each time.
So yeah, following on from that, we're doing something that podcast listeners don't know is we're indicating to each other that we want to talk next. And when you watch professional casters, I was lucky to go to MSI for League of Legends a couple of months ago. You see them sticking their hand out in front of each other saying, "I want to make the next point. I want to make the next point." that kind of communication and that kind of understanding of each other is only going to come from practice. And you say you need 3 games. Why don't we let the casters kind of jump on scrims with people for the the teams that are actually playing, to then just get a bit of practice? I know Thorkell, from Odin's side, we didn't let you in on one because I think you were part of Argonaut's house at the time, or Argonaut's house. So we were just like, I don't know if we can let you in on that one. But there should be the opportunity, and I think the captains should be quite open to that, because it's only going to make the experience
for a while
better
as well, because it would definitely improve the casting if we get them involved.
Yeah, I agree as well. Like what Farco was saying as well. Nobody's going to get it right 100%. Like I still get it right as well. I've probably done it for a bit, and you're always going to make mistakes, and maybe butt in on somebody, and that happens quite a bit because you're too hyped yourself. And obviously, once you get a synergy with your other caster, for example, you say you practice a few times, you kind of get used to it. You kind of know who's doing what at certain areas, because certain fights have got breakdowns where there's nothing really much going on, and that's when somebody else can like be right. This is my sort of space to speak, and then obviously once the fight gets going, then it could be somebody else that's saying that part and explaining all that as it happens. But like what any of us said as well, we obviously all learn by doing it, and if you're not doing it, you're not going to learn fully from it. And one thing that you said as well earlier, Forco, is obviously we've got a delay in chat as well, and obviously chat is great for feedback. Sometimes you can listen to it and you're like, yeah, okay, like some of that is just garbage, it doesn't make sense to you, it won't, and they're just moaning to moan. But there is some valuable feedback that you will get in there, and the GhostX said it as well. It's like sometimes you've got to take criticism for it as well. Like you might have done something wrong, and you'll learn from it. And like if you don't take criticism well, obviously it's going to be a bit harder, but like it will make you get better. There'll be certain things in there that will make you be like, oh, actually that's one thing I didn't think about, or I didn't see when that first happened, because obviously we're seeing the delay afterwards, and we're like, oh yeah, that happened, but we can't keep up with the chat at that point in time to say it at the same time they're saying it or explain what they want. And obviously different things in the games where if you're, for example, casting while you're controlling the camera, you're only seeing your perspective. So I've got to try and, like, if you're controlling your own camera and trying to get to see everything, you can't see everything. So there might be something going on in the background that makes it difficult. But obviously CBL is a bit different for that, whereas they've got multiple people seeing different parts, and obviously you've got to then pay attention to what the stream's showing and what you're seeing on your screen. So that's where you kind of learn different things by seeing different perspectives as it's happening, for sure.
That's definitely something I wanted to jump in on there, is the camera work, because that's two big differences. I mean, it's something I want you guys to go into a bit more detail because you have that experience, but with Rivals, you are controlling the camera most of the time. So you are controlling the camera that the stream is seeing as well whilst you're casting it. I know CB's trying to get it done so that he can have, like, he will be doing the main camera work, but you'll have smaller camera work going on as well, because it kind of works better that way. But my experience is, like, it's hard sometimes with that because of technical difficulties. So sometimes I know there was one of the times I casted where it just broke, basically. So I was trying to cast from the stream on a 2-minute delay whilst being in the call with the people that were seeing it live at the time, and I was like trying to put stuff in, couldn't really get it. But when you're doing it yourself, it's so much more difficult because you're physically controlling the camera moving around. If you compare it with, like, League of Legends, for example, they're not doing anything with the camera. They're seeing what the viewers are seeing, right? And so they don't have to worry about any of that. They're just focusing on the game. But in Conqueror's Blade, especially in Rivals, you have your camera as well. So it's good in some ways. You can zoom in on certain parts, you can see things and call it out so that, people may not have noticed it. But in other ways, it also adds an extra thing for you to go into. But with CBL, how does that work for you guys? Because you've done that CBL side. How does that work? Are you controlling a camera? Are you just watching it? I'd like you to get more in detail on that.
Okay. Let's move this on to actually how it works in tournaments, because what I'd love to do is go through each of the segments of the casting experience for you guys, and we'll then go through what happens currently and what could happen. So for me, the start is you are approached by someone to do the casting, and you've been given a date. What are you then given, and how does it work currently, and what would you like to happen? So pre-game. This is all pre-game, pre-stream even.
So pretty much they kind of organise a list of all the people that are taking part. Obviously, everybody's been approached or whatever. But then what happens is they'll send out dates of all these matches, obviously whatever's going on, what dates you've got, and what dates, and they'll ask which caster would like to select what date they're available, pretty much. So you'll kind of get your dates that you can say, you'll put it down, and then they'll pick a set of casters for each matchup. Eventually, once that's all fulfilled, it kind of moves on to that stage until the game actually comes up. Pretty much, there's nothing really from that part to when the first game starts that you're going to be casting. So between that, it's not until the day of the cast, like about an hour or so, I think it is, before your cast, I think you get that everybody then meets up. They'll explain what's happening. They'll explain the bands, picks, and all that stuff, and then it's pretty much straight into it. You can get to speak with each other, and then we're just straight on. They'll explain who's controlling the camera, so we get to know. And obviously, it's been different from both ones. Both CBLs have been slightly different, and the camera work is obviously done elsewhere. So getting used to that has been a bit different. But yeah, that's pretty much how it kind of goes from the very first thing of you going, I'm going to take part, or I want to be a caster, from being selected.
Just jumping on that, though, so just going on the camera work a little bit. So are you saying that you have your own camera? Because I can't remember from CBL, honestly. Are you inside the game as well, or are you just going from their camera work?
We all get inside the game, so everybody else is like that's casting is inside the game as a spectator, as well as looking at the other stream that they've got showing us on a screen, like a separate software that they have their screen that we're watching from.
From opponent view, I got two screens. I got the screen of the people were capturing the game, what they were streaming. We can see what they were streaming on the software. On my other screen, I was on the game to look at the game. So it's allow us, as you say, Temple, you have less charges than when you are casting alone in CB Warriors, but you're still in the game if you want to see some stuff. As we said, it was better for the first games because there were some problems at the beginning of the tournament, but it was easier to cast when it was very well centered at the end of the tournament. It was very enjoyable to cast like it.
That's the one good thing I would say is they took the feedback well and they improved the camera work as it went on. Like they took the feedback from the community, from captains like myself that were talking to them in the chat as well. They took that and they improved that camera work.
It's just little points that is sad. They're very reactive on it, but they should have done a work before. Because honestly, all the feedbacks I've made, not for saying it's me, but I made like 5 pages of feedback how you're supposed to play and to make the spectator mode. Because the guys that were engaged on it haven't done any scrim. And the first game, it was the first time they go on the spectator mode. They've never been in the spectator mode before, and it was very bad for it, but it's a fault, but they were very active on it. It's sad, but they react on it. I get some feedbacks after. We missed some stuff on the first matches, like on the Kebab versus Play, but we matched literally the first map. We don't see anything because it was very fast on Fjord of Elung. And but they were very active and improved it. So
yeah, I know Mark's waiting to say something. I just want to jump in one quick thing there, just to point out for the listeners here, is that the camera work for the CBL is done by an external company that gets brought in to do the camera work. That just to clarify so people are aware. Mark, over to you.
I was just about to say that. Remember the camera work, obviously, like we were saying there, it does make it difficult because obviously we kind of know what we're going to be looking at as a caster and what we'd want to see as a caster, because we know the game. And these the external casters done a great job taking on feedback. Thorkell, like you said earlier, is during my first cast on the first game that was I think it was the first match of the CBL this season. We were in the middle of cast, and literally I was looking at the channel on the left hand side, and you're just seeing this like Thorkell's typing, and it was like this big massive list, and it was just constant feedback, things that he's seen as he was watching the stream. That this could be better, this could be better. And in my head, I'm like, yeah, because for me, casting it at that point in time, I'm reading it and kind of casting and thinking, yeah, that's a good point. I never seen that myself. I'd like to have seen that. But they did afterwards ask for feedback, and we kind of sat down after the first matches and after the first few matches and says, look, this is what we need to see, where we need to see it. And then as a caster, we then obviously use our camera to kind of see stuff. And then that's when we can be like, oh, can we zoom in on this part? Can we have this be? And I think that's where they started to progress and get better at the game side of things. They kind of started to realize what was happening. They started to realize what may happen in certain maps as well, because we kind of explained how important certain aspects of certain maps would be for them to kind of learn from and see as the play goes on. And then that definitely made a difference. And the fact they had the second camera, once they got it working, once every now and then, it was a fantastic thing to be able to see two perspectives, not just the main fight, because the second part was also very important because it was maybe a two-pronged kind of push, and it made a massive
flank or something like that, yeah, which is one thing we historically missed a lot. I think just one thing I want to just raise again here is this seems to be a running theme throughout the whole series. get the community involved.
Exactly.
Because if you get the community involved ahead of time, if they'd spoken to you guys beforehand, maybe had a session with you and said, what do we need to know about this? What can we do before we go into this? Rather than, like you said, if the first game is the first time they've ever gone in spectator mode, of course there's going to be issues. Get the community involved, get them to give you help.
As you say,
yeah, go for it, Thorkell.
As you say, you should involve the community, because there is another problem on the tournament, like the maps. They didn't see the maps don't work. They changed the map 1 week before. Some players already knew it. Some players see the maps. They go on the games. They see it's bugged. Some people say to me, but they don't ask to them. I think honestly, they should have asked to like 1 or 2 captain to help, and most of all, they should have to CB, because CB organized the CB rival, so she knew how to do all of the stuff. She should have.
He's experienced a lot of those bugs on maps already.
He's the most experienced on it, so nobody got more experience on it than him on organizing tournaments. Even he get more experience than my games themselves, because it's doing it all the time, so it's normal. And on the caster stuff, there is also the problem that they should have to run a scrim before, as you said, to discover the spectator mode. And what they said is that my game didn't give them some stuff to see how it was working. But honestly, the company should have asked to test the spectator mode before too, I think.
Okay, so I think it was very clear that the start product of the CBL compared to the end product, that was the viewer experience, was massively improved from not just casting, but also from the camera work. And it happened actually rapidly, because the CBL was actually over quite a short period of time. How long and how much do you think should be done pre-tournament with the camera work, with the casters, with people with experience? How long does it take? Because for me, it won't actually take that long.
Exactly, it won't take that long, because you're just doing like 1 or 2 scrim. You're asking for people. If you ask to CB or to make the bans, or doing it on the channel, for the captain it will be better. If you're looking how it's work on CBL Asia, I think in CBL Asia they got some application to do the bans. They get an application dedicated to it.
I can tell you, because I've been part of this agency CBL. So it's on Discord still, but they have a bot on there, and you just do roll, and then you do the bans in there. So
it could have been good to get it. And for the casting point, you just have to do 1 or 2 scrim. And if they were asking us before, it's just don't ask. We didn't know before the first match is that they don't have any experiences. Even us don't have any information on it. And if they asked me, I would have write the 5 pages I write to explain what you should focus on, what you should do on certain maps. You should look at they don't know the game at all, the people doing the camera. So as I said, to be a good caster, to do the good camera point of view, you need to understand the game, and you need to understand what is important when you have to focus on. You need to know that the supply points are important on the game, all the stuff, and they didn't get it. And just asking for us and doing 2 stream, it's fine. Like 2 hours, it was enough, I think.
So this was a professional company that took it over, and I think we need to accept that they have got experiences elsewhere, and that's where my suggestion would be: get them into a scrim, have the professional team do the camera work, but also and record everything, but then also have some of our experienced casters do the camera work and do a comparison at the end. Just do like a watch session where it's like, okay, you guys were looking at this because in your experience with other games, that is what you'd want to watch. But in Conqueror's Blade, this is how you do it. And the reason is, and because you've got that knowledge, you can go into that detail and explain. And you can make, and I think you'd learn stuff from the professional casters or professional camera work people as well. And it would be that exchange. And guess what that does? That lifts everyone up together. That doesn't just have a wall of criticism come or require you to write a 5-page essay just to try and get them to improve as quickly as you can. That would be my suggestion.
Definitely with the game knowledge part, because you look at, I don't think this CBL was as bad, but the previous CBL, I remember watching some of the games and like they would be so zoomed in on the fight, which was, some of it was good because you want to see close-up fights, but they'd be so zoomed in, and then all of a sudden you just see Cav wipe across and no one could even see it coming because you were so zoomed in. And you're like, they had a second camera, but it was looking at something completely different. Flanking is one of the biggest things to watch out for when they have that secondary camera, for me personally, as a player, as a captain, as a caster, whatever, because that's one of the highest impact things that's going to happen. You need to see it coming. That's going to build excitement. But definitely they did improve massively. But yeah, having that session, once the teams have been decided, just get the captains in a call for like an hour or something one time, get them in and just say, look, this is what we want to do, or here's some of the rules, here's the maps, whatever, because you got to give them a bit of grace, right? I know ideally they're a big company, they should have a testing team, right? But at the same time, they would have to have like 40 accounts to be able to get enough people in to check everything, because there are some maps where you can't have people in overview, which people don't know about, because they're not going to have 35 or 40 accounts to go into a lobby to do it. Ideally, a good company they would, but just get the teams involved. Just go, we're going to do a practice game, just test everything's working. You two teams come in, we'll get all the casters in like 2 or 3 days before the tournament. We're not going to actually fight, but it doesn't mean anything. Well, we will fight, but it doesn't mean anything. Just do something random, whatever. But it's just to test that everything works, to test we have the cameras working, to test the maps work, whatever. Do it right at the start so we can test all the maps. Because I knew the maps were broken. We knew the spawn on Valley Fortress was broken when they picked that one. But we just thought, oh, well, I guess they want to do it. So we were still scrimming on it because it was like, it's fine. And then wasn't it White Elk as well that was broken because of the overview or something? I can't remember. And we had to change that one. And it was like, you would have known this if you just asked the captains. And should that be our responsibility to tell them they're broken or tell them there's bugs? Probably as well. We're probably held accountable for that. We should probably say, oh, by the way, there's a bug here. But if they're picking the maps, you've got to think, well, they probably tested these. That's where we come from as a captain. They must have tested them. They must be fine with them. We're going ahead with it.
Yeah, I agree with that as well. Like the sort of practice sessions would be fantastic. I think if you had, like you said, a couple of teams in, and then have every single caster in there, you watch over it. Obviously, the casters don't need to be casting it. They were just kind of watching how they would do it, or maybe they'd select certain casters to cast like certain phases of the game, so they can kind of get a synergy between the first two people that are casting. Even for them to practice as well would be good. And obviously, there's, like you said, there is phases where you'll be doing some certain works, and there's certain pushes you want to see the full push. You want to see a kind of close-in fight of the happening, and also maybe like the second camera sees the other part of the team that may be somewhere else, like preparing a flank or whatever.
Yeah,
and we're kind of keeping an eye on both of them. Or diving, Amia going and doing his stuff in the background because he's always on a supply point miles away.
He basically needs his own camera in tournaments, really, doesn't he?
He pretty much is. But yeah, having that would be great because then you can see how it kind of works and how it flows, and obviously when to kind of open up your tab, for example, or open up the certain bits so you can see what units are, when the time is to come up and show the statistics on the board, for example. Like even in things we had to kind of direct them as casters during the matches so we could see, can we have a look at what units are left and how many people
are,
and how many people have died that many times. Because obviously things like that, when there's that little break is the perfect time to do it, because then you'd be like, right, let's see what we've got here. And then that means the casters have got a prompt to say what they can speak about next, and where like they'll kind of have a knowledge of like, okay, so the next battle they've only got this amount of units to try and push for A or B, or kind of gives us a better.
I think that works well, like you're saying, you prompt them as well, so it's not always just them having to do it, but you saying, okay, let's see the deaths now. That works really well as long as they know how to see those deaths. Because if it's their first time in the software, if it's first time in the spectator, they're not going to know what button to press.
Exactly that, yeah. So it's definitely a good practice for them and for casters to kind of get that prompt. But I think certain casters have that knowledge to go, right, I want to see this, and we'll prompt it. And then we started to do that as the CBL kind of progressed throughout. And like you said, it was a very quick transition from when the kind of feedback was done from the very start, and even taking on the feedback from the chat. The chat was obviously giving them a lot of feedback as well. Like we said, some of it negative, some of it maybe very positive, and some very good feedback. So they were always learning from it, and it was good to see that. But if they did that in the first place, they wouldn't need to be. There may be a wee bit more learning through it, but it would be less of a like massive comparison if they did the practice session prior to it, and gave everybody that little bit of knowledge of what they need to know and where everything is and how to control the whole spectator. Because sometimes you can push one button and all of a sudden you're flying in the air and you're missing half of what's going on in the battle. That could easily happen on the spectator mode. So just getting used to that and adapting that very quickly would be good.
Yes, to conclude this point, I would like to be fair with them, because there was a lack of organization, but they were very active. They adapt them very well. They listen all the feedbacks they were, and I think they learn a lot about it. And I hope the next time they won't do the same mistake. I'm sure they won't do the same mistakes. And if at the final, the CBL was very enjoyable. It was once maybe of the best tournament we got because it was made by my games, and it's good at the end, but it was a little bit sad. As we said, we have been saying all the bad stuff, but it was a very good tournament at the end. We have to say it.
And it was long awaited for as well, right? It was
yes.
The community wanted it for years. So it was really good. Me as a captain, as a participant, I loved it. Even with the issues, should we say, that happened in the finals or the issues with the camera, it's still very, very good.
Yeah, I agree. I think it was definitely a great tournament, and I think, like we said there, it was long waited for. But I think Thorkell, you just said there, that if there is a gap, for example, if we have got a gap, then we are going to, like, between the next CBL, then there might be different people controlling it, and then they're not going to learn from it. But if the closer they are together, the more chances the same team is going to be controlling it. They'll have the same knowledge. If not, then that's why that practice session would be fantastic.
Right, that's a very thorough discussion on essentially what could be done even pre-tournament. We talked about it mostly there. So you're in the game, you've got access to a ton of cameras, you've got your professional casters versus you as the guys that are actually talking and saying what you're seeing. What could be added? What could be changed? What is it currently at, and how would we tweak that?
So, like we said, obviously with the pick and ban phase, right? I think a lot of people always ask in chat, like, what is a pick and ban? So constantly throughout the whole batch, because nobody knows what it is on a regular basis, or before the fight snap, it's been quickly spoke about. But maybe if prior to the match actually starting up, you've got that break, and obviously the casters are chatting, they've got little bits happening between things, but having a screen on there, pretty much showing the pick and bans would be fantastic, and it's up there for like a minute or two, so people can all see the pick and bans, the maps rotations, and who's playing what, who's on attack and defense would be fantastic. Because normally in competitive sort of things, you would see that, and they'd have like that phase where it comes up prior to the map starting, so everybody knows. And then just a few other things like that second camera usage needs to be kind of more active. I think it was used here and there, but it wasn't used at like enough times for people to see it all going on. But I think they would be definitely good adds to make the thing work better and flow better.
Yeah, they're difficult that function there, because if you look at CBL Asia, they have that right with the pick and bans with both maps and with the units, because they have map picks as well. Whereas obviously sometimes with CBL here we just have the set maps. I think we did pick them this time though, didn't we? We could ban a map each. I can't remember now, to be honest with you.
We did, yes.
I know with rivals we don't pick the maps, obviously they're pre-picked, but with the ban phase stuff, you can do that on the screen. I know that a lot of the time with the CBL, because I would be watching it as well, I would have access to the channels where they're doing the bans, so I would just then copy and paste the bans and put them in the chat on Twitch. And that's something the mods could do on Twitch. You know, we've got the mods there on Twitch. They could just, I'm pretty sure they have access to the CBL area as well. And if not, they'll see they can just get access to it, ask for it, whatever. They can put it in there and just pin it in the chat, because that's what they've been doing. They just pin my message in the chat when I put the bans in there.
Yeah,
they'll just do that from the start.
Yeah, I think if they did that, it would be perfect as well.
Because that is a lot of the questions for it. I think if we're talking like pre-game, one big thing that I want to go through is just knowledge of the teams, which is a big thing we need to cover.
Yes,
we'll go into that in a lot more detail later about the pre-game and post-game stuff. But camera work.
On this point, on the pre-game, I think it would be interesting, as you say, to show the pick and ban. They do something very good. It was when they put the map, because we were able to draw on it, to explain what's going to happen and the stuff. It will be great just to put some input on the scene, just to put the ban with just PNG of the units on the both sides for people. They get a lot of good design, and they're very good on it, so they get good images for all units. It could be good to just do PNG of units ban, put in the name of the team at the bottom, and put in the map for us to draw and the name of the map. And it would be perfect, I think.
Yeah, as you were saying right in there about camera work and stuff as well, obviously, I think a replay sort of feature would be fantastic. If we had something like that, so we could literally, in between that phase, you can kind of have a quick look back at what just happened for that push, for example, and you can kind of speak about that as they prepare for the next phase, or something like that would be great. And then there was another thing that was in the top of my head, but I think if Thorkell speaking, it's kind of gone up my head. But yeah, like, what was it? Pass on. I can't remember just now, but there was definitely something that'll pop up. I'll probably remember it.
I think a replay feature would help just in general. The ability to record a scrim or a match in a controlled way, whether or not that's exactly as the caster is seeing it, or like it would be in some League of Legends games where you have the ability to just go wherever and see from that particular perspective. I don't quite know how the mechanics of the game work and whether or not that's even feasible. I imagine it would be quite a large file, is my reservation for that, and therefore having some server capacity to deal with that would be difficult. But then somebody somewhere might know better.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at League of Legends Start, I think they just have like essentially two different streamers, don't they? And they essentially just go, let's look 30 seconds back because that camera's looking at this other fight instead. Because sometimes there's two fights happening at the same time. So maybe there's some kind of feature of that, but that sounds like a lot of effort.
I'm also thinking for post game. where you then have the
Most
ability
games
to
are
say,
good, yeah.
instead of just describe what happened, you have the ability to just to rewatch it and just say, look, this is the really key moment here where the cav came in, or a pike advance completely stopped the cav, and a
Here's
fight
some
was turned.
highlights of the game for people that may have turned in late. Here's the big fights. A quick just 30 seconds of one fight, quick 30 seconds of another fight could be a great way to sort of sum it up at the end.
So yeah, keeping it on the in-game stuff. We'll go to post-game and pre-game later. But keeping it on in-game, how is the current interface as a camera user and as a caster? How is it currently, and what would you like to change?
I think once you know the shortcuts, it's not that bad at the moment. There are definitely improvements that can be made to it, but once you know what buttons do what things, it's not too bad.
Not the tab one.
Yes, I was just about to say the tab one is the one thing that they took away that was probably the best thing. Like the fact that you could look at the whole 15 list of players, what units they all have, rather than this little bit along the bottom. Obviously, you see it on a regular, it's always there. However, it is only 5 at a time, and sometimes you're not getting to see what you want to see. I think
And
that
sometimes
thing.
it cycles by itself as well. And you're like, no, I was trying to look at that one before.
Yeah,
I
and then
definitely agree the
there's
old
no way
system
to
I think
change
I
it.
preferred, but I don't think this system is awful, if that
It's
makes
not
sense.
awful. It is
It's not awful.
awful.
But they could just add one on the button, because you still get a lot of button on the keyboard, just to do the same thing with 15 on the whole screen. Because they bring a lot of new options, because you can see all the units, what's the active one, how many units is still on it, what archery they have took for CBL. It's useful, for CBL rivals not, because there is no archery. But there is a lot of good option on it, but it could be great just to add another button just to put the 15 at the same time on the wall.
Yeah, definitely. I think being able to view the whole team, it may be not in the same format it is now, because obviously for those that have seen on the stream, it's quite a big bar at the bottom. It shows all the pictures as well. I think you don't need that. I think if they had one button you can press that just shows the list, shows everyone's kills, deaths, whatever, that would be useful for stream. Because otherwise you're going, right, okay, those two have two, okay, next page, okay, these ones have that next page, that's that, and it takes up a lot more time, whereas if it's all in just one screen, it's a lot easier to see.
And that in relation, it reminds me, my point I was speaking about is that obviously if we had the tab with the 15, another camera that could be involved with is, you know how obviously when you're watching individual players, you've kind of got to flick and just click a button until you eventually find something. There should be a way in which you can go to a tab, look at the players, and say you want to look at an individual player's perspective. You can click on that player and it goes directly to that player's perspective. If you see him at the front, or like for example, you see Ami at the back supply point, you want a second camera on him, you could just watch him fighting on that supply point with like 3 or 4 people. Like things like that would be a great addition, as well as having that tab, because you can see and just click and go pretty much zoom to that person. I know that may be a difficult thing and a difficult task to have installed or made in the game, but it would be an interesting thing to have.
I think a number of players would be really interested in just getting a single player's perspective for a whole game. So let's say Amir Cam or Dan Cam, like one of those where you follow these kind of star players, and you'd learn so much just from watching how they play. Obviously, you can't hear the comms, and comms are a major part of what's going on. I know Amir basically says, I'm going to go and do my own thing. And then he'll start shouting when something big has happened.
Yeah.
So
if we look at the prime example for me of him doing his stuff is in the last season of Rivals, not the most recent one that we just finished, but the one before. So it would have been season 2? When we were fighting Surf Slayers on White Elk, because he went out into their spawn, was doing so much dumb shit by himself, keeping so many people busy. He was like, guys, do you trust me? Like, yeah, she was like, Sally now. And so we start selling out. He comes from behind, charges one cab in, gets a second out, charges out. That kind of stuff. And I don't think it was seen on stream really, because they weren't looking at Amir, they were looking at the main fight. So nobody saw what was going on. We saw it afterwards because he showed us, he records everything. So he showed us his perspective. We were like, what the were you doing out there? But it works. And that is the sort of epitome of Amir. Like, he goes and does his own thing, but when he sees that opportunity, he shouts about it and he goes. It's similar when we've done like grasslands in CBL. He'll be blocking their supply and like, guys, you need to push now. I'm blocking their supply. Go. This is where we go. And so there are key moments like that would be fantastic to see from their perspective on stream.
That's why we could talk about the fact that they bring a second camera on sometimes. There is some matches they said us that they were not all here, so they get only one camera some days, so there is no second camera. But even for CBL Rivals last season, I bring a second camera on CBL Rivals affair because it was the will of CB at the beginning. I don't know if he was able to do it on the main one at the end, because it was a little bit hard with the software, all the stuff. For my part, I just capture a Discord share of a player, and it's my second camera, and I can switch if I want between the two of them. But the problem if I'm doing it is because if I'm doing it with my caster, he cannot look at the good point, because if he's focusing on the player, it's hard. If he's focusing on supply, you don't see the main action to comment it. But it's very interesting if you are able to do it, because as you said, the second action are very main stuff on the game. The fact that you can cancel a supply for like 2 minutes, that have been done, like Kebab versus Playboy, I think, in the CBL. We didn't see a lot of it. We see like a little point at the back. If they just put the second camera at this moment, it would be wow, and everybody will be it's amazing. But we just as a caster or as a experienced player in tournaments, when you understand what's going on, you see it. But all the viewers don't get it, and it's the magic of the game. It's the fact that there is this point, the fact that all the teams have to go back on the point. You have to see it, because we can explain it after the game, as say Drayton before. But if you get highlights or if you can show it, it's very better for viewers, because we understand the game, and it's what we have to do also. It's to make the viewers that don't have this experience to understand what's happened, and it's hard without any images.
Yeah, I agree. Like as a streamer side of things, like for myself, obviously, I have that like ability in the ways that the softwares that you've got, but potentially, obviously, we're not using the same softwares that like the actual full thing was using for their stream. But I, for example, for myself, could always put a second screen on myself by just pushing a button that will already direct to something else that I'm showing off or whatever I could do. And I'm able to do that. But obviously, if I don't have two cameras, for example, for the casting side of things, I'm not watching two screens. But I would be able to add that as a stream thing myself. So these guys, obviously, are a little bit more technical. They have that option to have that camera. It's a straightforward thing enough to add for everybody else to see that. It's just knowing when to use it and the right times to have it on, I think.
Yeah, CB mentioned kind of his ideal, which is you almost have like a head of production that has everyone's perspective and your ability to flick between the two, have a small insert in the bottom corner of something important, but then the ability to do a replay where you could put the replay in full screen and then still see the map that's going on in a lower section.
Yeah,
I think that would
we
be
are very
super
limited
cool.
by the game's functions current moment, though, obviously, because with the custom games, you can only have I think it's maybe 8 people can be in casting mode. I think it depends on the map. Some maps you can't have as many, but that if you're thinking like a whole production team, you've got the casters in there. If you want multiple cameras, that's going to fill up very quickly. Do we have that current capability there to be able to do that?
Yeah, we personally probably don't for doing things like CB rivals. Obviously, it depends on your software for your computer, how good your computer is, all that malarkey as well. You've got to be able to have all these different cameras on and all these screen shares that are running your computer and CPU and whatever. But for the higher end aspect, they should be able to have a way in which they can do that multiple ways where they're watching double. Like, you don't have to have that many. Obviously, 8 spectators is really enough. You've got your 2 casters, for example, and then 6 cameras would be enough. You could have, like you says, a camera for an individual player, and then you can have a camera that's watching the full fight, and then you can have a camera that can then have ready for the replay, for example, and then you've got a few other cameras free that you can have watching flanks and other bits and bobs. It's just having all that. You have to have all that staff for it as well, and if they don't have the staff for that, all these cameras and stuff as well, you're also in a stuck position as well.
The difficulty on it is that to do this work, you have all the cameramen to be enough experiences on the game to understand what's gonna happen. Because if you don't understand the game, you don't follow the game, you won't catch the good action. We all know the game enough to do it, but for the casting side, even if I say that it's gonna happen here, they tried, they do some kind of stuff after the feedbacks, but it's very hard, even for us, when we are casting, it's hard to get all the points because you have to focus on it. And you need these experiences. And if it was doing very well because the side of the camera is good, for the CBL we don't need to be in the lobby if it was perfect. For the first game, hopefully we are in lobby because it was a little bit of a mess because it was not proper. But at the end, I don't even need to move in the game. I just have to look at the software. I can just comment what they're showing, because you have to comment something the viewer will see. So it's better for you not to be in the game if it's it's well done. So
yeah, that's definitely true.
So this is going to lead on to another point I've got, which is what are the questions that the chat is always asking when we're watching a game, such as what's the unit kills, what were the pick bans, and having that information kind of available. Because we have the delay of a couple of minutes, we're not able to have that kind of chat caster interaction, make quick adjustments to what we're seeing. What do we think about that?
For what I see, it's maybe a solution because I didn't test it because I don't look deeper in Twitch. But I think you can fix a message like in Discord. You can, it's apparently in French, so I don't know how to call it. You can fix a message from a moderator on the chat in big. So you can just fix the ban of the game for the whole game, and it's fine. It could be a solution. We don't talk about it, but I'm sure it's doable just to do it because you can fix the message of the ban, and it will be good. It will be a solution for it.
What you're saying there as well, right, and is obviously like if you want to see the stats in game, like what you says, like there is breaks in play, and I think that's always a key. That should be one thing you go on straight to is like show the stats, show the positions where we're at after that push, or even if in the middle of the push to see it as it's counting down. Like you can only need to bring the little scroller down because it's only a small bit. It doesn't take up the whole screen. You still see the whole action as long as you've got your camera positioned in a way that you're not blocking the view of the actual fight with the stat bit. You should be good, but that's always experience with the camera and knowing where you're looking at.
Yeah, I think also one thing to jump on as well is the fact that most other tournaments, most other casting experiences, they're not interacting with the chat. So do we need to be tailoring this to can we interact with the chat? As long as you have the information there that you can keep going, and you can talk about stuff, where to go to next, then that's going to be good enough. It's nice to interact with chat, but do we need to factor that into it?
I think in the CBL World Cup, it's a community tournament. If you're doing the second division, for my part, I'm not the mainstream. I know in the mainstream there are a lot of people, so it will be very hard. But between games, you can answer the question after the game.
Yeah, definitely.
Between the two games, sometimes you get to talk. So you can answer the question between the games, but you don't have to cut what you're talking about. You don't have to cut the comments. You don't want to go out of the game during the game to answer the question because there is a delay. There is a way they won't listen to it. So I think you don't have to interact except at the end of the game. That's point. And in the CBL, it's very hard because it's official tournaments. There's a lot of stuff between the matches. So I don't need it could be good to have just a moderator talking on the chat. While I was looking at the game, sometime because I got 3 screens. And I was answering to people in the chat at the same thing. I was casting and looking at the software to cast the game. So it would be great to get somebody from my games or the stuff to be able to answer the question.
Yeah, so that brings me on to that factor as well. Is like we don't have to interact with chat. Like if I was watching any professional stream sort of things for Call of Duty, League of Legends, anything like that, they're not really interacting with the chat. They're focused mainly on casting the game, going through everything on the insights and everything like that. But because they know kind of what the cast and what chat are going to be asking, they know their responses, they know what they're going to be speaking about because they've got the knowledge, and that's pretty much what it all comes down to. It's all about the knowledge. Obviously, we can't answer for the fact that the camera settings are somebody else's control. And I think that's mainly most of the chat is normally about the camera sides of things. Okay, there's going to be complaints about certain things, and we're not seeing things from casters, or they might not like the caster, but these things like that you can't help. You just got to ignore that side of things. But yeah, for the most part, it's pretty good that if you just focus on the game and the cast, that's where the interesting part is, and that's what everybody's there to watch. Like the chat will chat between themselves, they'll argue between themselves, they'll point out things that they like and they don't like. So you can't keep up with that. Never. It's not important. That's not important, I don't think.
You're never going to be able to contend with chat, but we do have the experience of what the regular questions often are, and finding time within game to answer those should be quite easy. I mean, you get some games where the action is just constant, and that's where having a replay feature would be really nice. Right, we've talked about in-game there. I think let's talk about post-game. So this is after one of the matches has been played, and we're now in a gap between, say, game 1 and game 2, or the series is finished and we're then waiting for the next series to start. What happens currently, and what would we then like to change?
One thing I just wanted to say on that, it's a very quick point, is that for me, with the most recent season of CBL, it just felt like, okay, the series has ended, end of stream. We'll just put it on pause until the next game starts. That's what it felt like for me. I don't know if that happened for every game, but for a few of the ones I watched, it was just, okay, the match is over, cool, we'll see you in 45 minutes for the next one, bam. And then it was just on stream starting and whatever. They had to put that, like, the pause screen up. That's what it felt like a few of the times. I feel like you could, whilst there's not a huge amount to talk about, I think there could be more stuff done on the end of the game.
I agree there as well. In terms of the end thing between game 1 and game 2, I think we go through the stats very quickly. Normally what happens, they kind of show the screen, but I don't think they keep it on long enough for us just to go, right, this is what we want to speak about. Look at all the stats of the leaderboards, for example, because you've got a good amount of time between game 1 and game 2 and stuff, and everybody's setting up and stuff and getting their bands picked and everything. So you've got a good amount of time to go in between that. And obviously we don't have to go just because the teams are ready. The cast is up to the team that's in control of it to give you that little bit of time between it. Obviously, people are on schedules. You don't want to be having players that are sitting there waiting for half an hour, 45 minutes, just waiting between a game and a game because that's just far too long. And even for the viewers, you don't want to be sitting waiting for too long. But long enough to see what happened, like pretty much go over the stats, kind of speak a wee bit more in depth with that. They obviously show the map as well, that we get to go onto like a little draw board and we can draw things if we want. But I think they put it on before we're even thinking about doing that. And some things we're like kind of forcing us to put it on, like to speak to that, but we're not actually ready to speak about that, or we're not finished the stats. I think that's the only thing we're practice between the casters, and what we're going to do after games we're going to do, just giving a good amount of time to finish all these end points that we probably were wanting to speak about.
I clearly agree with you, because I think it's you need to organize yourself, because if we were asking them some stuff, they will give it to us. There's no problem, because from my experience in CBL, at the end of the game, I tried to speak on stuff. I just ask them to put the map. They put the map. When I make my feedback, I say them just should show the stats. They try to show the stats. But you just need to organize it, because if you give them all the information they have to do, just say then, can I see it? They will put it on the screen. It's as you say in game, just because you don't talk a lot about it. There is the squad menu you got on the top for the deaths, for the units lefting, because you have to look at the T4, the T5 lefting, because at the top you just see the number unit, but if there is peasants, it's not the same thing. Well, it's fucked up with the monk, because monk is only 8, but we don't give a shit about it right now, but it's another problem. But you have to ask them to show it, because you're not controlling the camera, so just say, oh, you can press, if you press, I said it, if you press X, we can see the menu, and they press X when I said it. You just have to communicate.
Yeah, I just think, talking about sort of more specifically the end game, I think one good thing they could do is that when you get to that end game, just flip it over to one of the casters' point of views for their camera instead, because then you guys can click on the people that you want to see, the stats you want to see. Because from what I could be wrong, because my memory's awful, everyone knows that, but from my memory, it was that they started with just showing the scoreboards, right? And then as the sort of tournament went on, they would start clicking just on the MVP. They'd look at that, and then a little bit after that, maybe they clicked on a couple of names. But if you have that control, you could spend 5-10 minutes while the teams are getting ready, because from my point of view, most of the time we're waiting for teams to be ready, not the production staff, right? So you can then spend that time just going through, looking at all the individual players, looking at like damage tanked, for example, which is a big stat that not a lot of people that aren't in that competitive scene don't think about. Damage tank, damage taken, all that kind of stuff, and look at all the damage dealt, because a lot of the time in the scoreboard, you'll see someone at the top with like 150 unit kills. A lot of that might be serfs, you know, and the viewers won't necessarily see that. So being able to delve into that in more detail without you going, okay, can you click on that first person? Okay, can you click on the next one now? Okay, you can click on the next one. You know, you guys have more control of that as a caster then.
Okay, so that's where it becomes impossible, because they don't have our perspective on this stream whatsoever, right? So obviously we can see it, and we can look through and explain it all ourselves, but we have to direct them. Obviously they don't have a camera up for us to see what we're seeing or anything like that, so they would have to be directed in a way, or they would just have to kind of listen to our prompts. So obviously we are prompting, and we've started getting better at that, and people started getting better at that during it. It is prompting and asking for certain individual people, but like I say, they were changing that screen sometimes on their own while we're in the middle of talking about it. And Ninefingers did it quite a lot, where because Ninefingers has got a lot to say normally afterwards, because he likes to do all his stats and stuff and look at all. So he does a lot of that, and before you know it, I'm looking at a different screen, and I'm like, oh, why have they changed it? Like, that does, like, they just need that time to kind of realize that we are going to speak about that, and then we're going to go into more details, like you say, there, Temple, certain stats that you don't think about in game. Obviously, we will always speak about the highest kills that are made, or the highest individual hero kills. They're always going to be the top chats, because that's the only thing you see on the basic state stats until you open up each individual player. But yeah, I think, like you says, there isn't a way that they could see what we're looking at for them to know, or they can't transfer it to us, for example, to control that. That is all done by their side of things.
What's stopping them implementing that for the next one? That's my thought.
Yeah,
I think there is 2 points on it. You can say them what you want to see, But the problem is that we get like I think 8 casters, different casters, and there is different level of experiences on the casters too. So some casters will just say, "Oh, it's finished, fine," and other casters would like to go deep in the stats, as you said. And maybe if we get some time define like a schedule, you see the stats, you talk about the maps. For them, and after they just have to adapt when you say, because you know that the man playing the shield lamp is very important, but it's at the bottom of the stats, so you would like to see how many taken damages of this kind of stuff. You would like to know it, so you need to say them, but it's need a little bit of schedule, as you say, because they will just switch the screen on your face, and you would sometimes we speak about something, they switch, we say, oh, okay, and we just switch to another subject.
So in terms of like implementing that, because you say you don't have control, is it possible to put in, say, like a command where you'd hit a button and say, in 15 seconds, can I please switch to this? That would be what the command would say. And you then say, right, I want to see the map in 15 seconds. You then finish your point, and then in 15 seconds, it just transitions. I think that'd be a really good one. But what I'd love to see, and when we specifically mentioned the scoreboard, is when you get that guy that's got 150 unit kills, I'd love to see what units he had. And linking pre-game with post-game and the ability to have that kind of information, that's just a screenshot, right? Like that shouldn't be too hard to implement, and having that information builds a more complete picture as to what's just happening.
It's true, and I got to say, I tried to do it with a screenshot, and it's perfect. I done it in the last CBA rivals. Someone for me take a screenshot, and at the end of the game, you can say he play it. That's why you get the score, and it's very interesting.
Yeah, I think like what you said there as well. Like, if you were to do that for every individual person, screenshot it. Like, I'm pretty sure CB says that he does that for CB rivals anyway, and he gets everybody's stats, and there's all these information that he saves up so that he's got knowledge of the next matchup, for example. So you could then speak about, well, last battle, Amia had 7 hero kills, but he had 150 kills, but they were serfs. You know what I mean? Like, you can say all these little things. That you'd have all these extra prompts and stuff for the casters, and that knowledge could be shared between all the casters, so they could see who's on the top leaderboard stats wise and stuff like that. But like you says, with the whole control things, they do prompt us in our ears that nobody else obviously hears. So they will speak to us saying, "Oh, we're moving to this at a certain time, or we're going to move this in the next 5 minutes. Will we speed it up or whatever, or slow it down, or can you speak about that?" But it isn't as knowledgeable, and there isn't as much. But there's no way for us as the caster to kind of prompt them, if that makes sense, because we can't. The only way is to tell over the stream. If they had a way that we could do it, that they can hear it or see it, and we can't, then that'd be perfect, because it is a different voice channel that they're listening to. They're listening to Discord.
I think just touching on what you said there needs to be a bit of back and forth there, right? It can't just be them telling you when to rotate. You've got to have that ability as well to try and direct it, because at the end of the day, you are the ones that are communicating to the viewers, right? Because it may not be so much with CBL, but with just tournaments in general, I feel that a lot of the time between games, you're just sat looking at the lobby with all the people just sat in there, and that's what you're seeing on screen a lot of the time. So being able for you guys or myself as casters to guide that a bit more, have more images on the screen that you can just then go through and talk about. If it's the map and you're doing strats in there, great. If it's not, then that's fine. But you have other things you can talk about. And I think one of the biggest things for me with tournaments in general that needs to improve pre-game, post-game, whatever, is just more tie-ins between other tournaments, more talking about, oh, well, these teams have this matchup history, they've done this in the past, they've done that in the past, let's talk about this, because there's not much of that. And I know that historically in like CBL, they would ask the teams for a big sheet of information of who are your players, where are they from, what have they done. I don't think they did it with this most recent CBL, but I know they did it one before, because then you guys were talking about it on stream, because I remember like Coffee and Nine and yourself were talking about, you know, where the teams have come from, what they've done in the past, because you had that information. And definitely the casters, because you've done it a long time, you've improved that knowledge, you have a lot of that knowledge just basic now, but get more of that stuff involved. Get these questionnaires from the teams with all this deep information.
This is why I wanted to do post-game before pre-game, because the easiest way to tie in is when you get to later rounds of a tournament, where you can start looking at what happened in the previous game. And I'll tell you now, from when teams scout out each other, I know exactly who's going to be playing the special units. I know exactly who to target, I know exactly who to watch. And then when we see them disappear off the map, we know they've gone to get them. So that kind of experience we have as players, I'll tell you what, the casters can do the same. And the casters should have all that information there, because a couple of screenshots and it's done.
It's still a little bit... the problem is still, it's a lot of work to do, and you have to get the experiences, and for the outside societies, they don't get, the companies don't get these experiences on the game, so they can do it. And even from some casters, some people just want to create content and just cast the matches, it's a lot of work to do because we're all doing it for free. We get nothing on it.
Exactly. That's what
We
I was
don't
saying.
have
You're doing it for free
anything.
at the end of the day.
Sometime I'm doing it, sometime I don't get the time because I'm not working at now, but you get to work, you come back from your work, you say, oh, gonna cast it. You don't have, sometimes some weeks you don't have the time, but when you take this time, it's very good to do, as you say. And to know all the past of the other teams, other stuff, just look back on the other season or ask to players, ask to Temple. For my part, I'll say I get the chance to get Machin or Canopy. Machin is the captain of Nobiches. Right now they win the CBL rivals. So if I get a question, he know everything. He may be one of the players that's most invested in the game, so I just have to ask him. They are playing from the beginning of the game for Akonop, I think. So they know all the stories about the teams. They can do some storytelling about the teams, which is very interesting. We tried for my part, we tried to do some on CBL, but it was a very short one because at the beginning of the game, they were like, oh, we're gonna launch a game in 2 minutes, so we talk about it. And it's true that maybe you can say, oh, it's very important teams. We can say that stuff before, and maybe you can just prepare it before, just say it will be a little bit longer. But it's more work to do, and it's more work to do for the company, and it's more work to ask to do for casters that some won't do because they don't have the time and it's not interesting for them. And some will do it, but if you don't ask them, they won't do it. They won't say it to you.
Yeah, I think it's just getting people involved more. Just even if it's just with the captains, like when you do because you do the bans an hour beforehand, right? Just 2 minutes or 5 minutes of that. Just say, okay, now you've done the bans. Can we just have a quick, what's the history of your teams? Just go talk to the casters for 2 minutes and just give them a brief history so they have something to talk about. Because I could sit there and go, yeah, we're fighting kebabs in the first round. We have this history with them. We've done this many times. Here's some players to look out for. That's a quick 2 minute thing that I'm sure any captain would be happy to do.
Yeah, you were in my head there for a second. I'm sure you were listening to what I was thinking, but I was saying that, yeah, like obviously post game for time between hand as well. You could even bring in captains in the cast and in the stream, so that you can speak to them about how do you think that match went for you? Who do you think was your top performer? You can ask them questions for each captain, and then that keeps the stream in that gap a little bit less of the just watching a screen of like people loading in. And then obviously, like we said, the potential of a replay system where if there's like, say, we've watched one series and we're waiting to watch another series, but there's like 5 minutes or 10 minutes of a delay, you can have a replay system on with a 10-minute countdown timer to when the next cast starts. You know what I mean? So like you're still watching something, and if people that are just joining in can still kind of see the highlights of the last game, for example, in between the series would be fantastic as well.
I clearly agree with you, but there is a little problem, I think, for CBL fight. I am doing it with the CBL rivals. I'm taking some captains, I'm taking some fresh players from the teams to talk about. We're doing interview, how was the match. After we try to compare or analyze this of the match, because we say, oh, maybe do it, that was a strat at the beginning, they adapt this way. And after the game, we ask them, were you doing it on purpose, or was it just YOLO and you get a good chance? But I think the problem with CBL is that it's on the My Games channel, and they have to be confident on the captains because there is some people of the community that you cannot say, oh, you can on the My Games vocal, and it's fine. We're all content creators for the casters, so they have confidence on us. But they cannot bring everybody. I'm sure there is some people they can bring to us, but it's a lot of work for them to be sure on it, and it's very it's not doable, I think, honestly.
Yeah, it's a risk.
Yeah.
How long do you think that you'd need to do a decent pre-game or post-game analysis after game one of a 3-game series, would you say? How long, what kind of time length would you want for that, and what roughly structure would you go through?
Honestly, it will depend on the game, because if a game is amazing, there is a lot of if it's the map, if it's original police, it will be longer. Sometimes you will be able to talk all you want to say about the game during the game, because original police is a little bit slow, so you can say like 5 minutes of the analysis during the game. And some maps like Fjord of Elung, you can speak like 20 minutes because the game is very fast. You have to analyze the fact that it was on supply, other stuff. So it very depends on the game. It depends on the teams, because if it's not a balanced match, it will be very fast. You will say, oh, they go on B, they destroy them because they do it, it's finished. So you cannot really be sure about it. It's a reason why it's hard to schedule the matches, even if they schedule it very large at the beginning, but it's very hard to schedule the matches correctly because of it.
So I think in between games in a series, there should be less like analysis pretty much, and you can wait till the very end of the full series to kind of analyze all of it. But for example, you'd want to be spending no more than 10 minutes on an in-game one, definitely, because I think 10 minutes is a long spell, even for the players to be waiting, and that takes up even more time. So you're thinking if it's a free game series, there's like an extra 20 minutes for people to wait, just sitting, waiting as players. But if you were to do like say 5 minutes as like a chat, you've got like 2 minutes to look at the team stats, go through individual people, then another like 2 minutes to look over the whole team progression, and then maybe like a 1 minute preempt of the next match, or like a couple of minutes of the next match. You can maybe make like 6-7 minutes in total before the next match would then start in a series, and then have the full analysis after the full game series, and then that's you pretty much. You can then go, right, remember back to game one where this happened, and then you can then analyze a wee bit more of that if you remember the knowledge, and obviously most people will, because it was just, they're quite quick enough games to remember most of the main games. But obviously the bigger the series becomes as it goes from like a 3 game series to a 5 game series, that then makes it a little bit longer and a little bit harder to kind of analyze it all at the very end. But obviously you have a decent amount of time between them. Maybe like on the third game, after the third game, you have a wee bit more of a longer analysis of the first couple of games.
I agree, because you have to be able to synthesize and summarize what you want to say if you, for it not to be too long. I think it could be interesting to have a basic schedule like say MarkofGee 2 minutes, 1 minute, 2 minutes, and you have to be able to adapt. I think, because if the casting desk is able to send the game in 2 minutes, they're able to send it in 3 minutes. But you have to be able to adapt, wait for it, send messages. Oh, maybe you can go faster, but you have to be more tolerant, and you have to be very adaptive on it.
Just for me, coming out from a sort of from a captain's perspective or a participant's perspective, I think in between the games there should be almost no time, right? Because you want to try and get back into, you want to keep it flowing, you want to keep moving. I think yes, I think maybe 5 minutes max, because otherwise you have teams that there have been teams in the past that have tried to abuse that and trying to stall things while they do strats, things like that. So I think there needs to be a set time between games. But then I think the key thing, like you said, is being able to adapt to it, being fluid with it, because some games you'll be able to talk about loads, some games you won't, especially after, if we're talking post the tournament, post the series as well, because you'll have some games like if it's on Heilung Fjord, those games are over in like 3-4 minutes sometimes because it's such a fast map. Then you have some matches where the game itself goes on for 15 minutes maybe. So you've got to have that fluidity, you've got to have that ability to be able to adapt to each one. I think that's a big key thing for it.
I think as well, between games though, you've got that issue of players having to set up structures and what they're having. So like they obviously don't, like they know the maps prior to it, but they won't have everything set up for their teams and who's taking what or whatever. For example, they might not have all of that for every single game set out, and they have to do that in that little break. So you need to have it long enough for them to be able to set up as well. And obviously it should be starting on a bang on time. Like they should have their schedule, like, okay, you've got 10 minutes from now or whatever. And maybe somebody should tell the teams that in 10 minutes time we'll be starting a match. So if they're stalling, then the game starts with whatever they've got at that point in time. And then that's kind of the way it is, because you have to kind of be structured enough to make it professional enough. You don't have players going for a break in the middle of like a tournament and disappearing for longer than needs to be, because the game has to be there and it's all regimented. So
for me, I'd want to give slightly more time than we think is necessary, because there's the human factor. So you do have to recognize that if people have been casting for the last hour, they might need to take some toilet breaks. So having like a structured time where like, right, we're going to do post-game analysis for 7 to 10 minutes. The game is going to start 15 minutes after the first one ends. And then the players have got a chance to go and genuinely have a break, walk around, whatever. I know loads of us are gamers, so that we're not going to move out of our chairs. But people do need to like have that structure and say, right, we have a 15-minute countdown. But then if the time overruns, you then have like a procedure for, okay, you cause this to be late, you get a negative effect. It could be that if one team is consistently late, they lose one of their bans. And that ban then basically becomes a blank. And it then carries on, because that's how they'll do it in professional League of Legends. If you broke a rule, you get punished for future games. So I'd have it like that.
Mm-hmm.
I agree. I think you need to be able to adapt, because I say Temple on Fjord, it lasts like 5 minutes. You need at least to explain a little bit the game, not the whole game. Between them, like having at least 10 minutes. But on some map like Regionopolis, it's better for the player to go straight. So minimum 5 minutes, because there is some time for the casting desk for CBL or other stuff. you need to do it like 5 minutes, but you have to get the preparation. You get to save regional police 5 minutes, Fjordelung 10 or 15 minutes. You have to get this time to know how many time will have to speak, and they have to ask us because they don't know it too. So they have to ask us, oh, on this map, how many time you think you will need between the games, and after we do the boss of the side, even if it's a BO3, BO5, or BO7. I think you need to talk about the map at the end too, at the end of the BO to compare the attack, the defense, what they have done. And we need to spend more time after the two maps because it's not a problem for the players between two different maps, but between attack and defense, they can change the strat as say Temple, I think.
I think it depends whether it's a best of 3, 5, or 7 as well, right? Just from a player perspective, because if you're there for, like, for example, the finals, it's a best of 7, you could be there for 3 or 4 hours playing. Whereas if it's a best of 3, you could be there for 30 minutes. You know, like that massive for me as a player from going perspective, that massively impacts that because I don't want to have to sit there for 15 minutes in between each game in a best of 7 because that's like we're talking what if it goes to the 7 games, that's a long time. That's almost 2 hours of just in between games where I'm not playing. You know, like that's going to very much add up.
Yeah, I was just going to add it to that point, that last part. They're saying, yeah, exactly that. If you say you've got a 7 series, like after 3 series, you have like a longer break maybe for like the toilet breaks and everything else, and then that's it. But like in between it, you keep them shorter because it is a long period of time you're going to be sitting there casting and or playing in the game. So yeah, for sure, it would just depend
just
on
clarify
the
from the
series.
start.
Yeah, it would
I think
be
just clarify from the start, have it set so everyone's aware of it. Because otherwise, you have some people going, "Oh, but I need to go to the toilet. Oh, but then we can't delay. Oh, well, this team's taking the piss because they're delaying things. That maybe they're doing their strats or whatever. That's unfair advantage from them." You've had all this stuff in previous tournaments. We had it in the last CBL. So just clarify it from the start. Make those rules set and stick to those rules. Because they're even just like we didn't know what the set time was in between each game. They didn't say. Whereas some tournaments will say you have 3 minutes from the end of the last game to get into lobby and be ready. Otherwise, you get penalized. You know, like you need to have that set thing there. I think for me. But
Yeah, make it longer than necessary because it's just inconveniences everyone.
yeah, make it whatever length you need to, but make it set. I think that's the big thing for me as a player. So everyone just knows.
Exactly. They just need more organization, less improvisation, and more preparation on it. It needs to be set before the tournaments. Before you know the maps, you have to know how many times it is for the BO3, for the BO5. As you say, you need to do very short time between two maps. You can take a little bit more time, but you have to be fast and to adapt on it. But you have to be set before and do preparation.
How much time do you guys need for a pre-game? What do you think is an appropriate amount of time? And what do we as like viewers as well as casters think is an appropriate thing to talk about during the pre-game? Because we mentioned that knowing the history of the teams is a really important one and knowing a lot of context because we had plebs versus kebabs in the last CBL, which is arguably an amazing final, and that happened in the first round. There's a lot of history there, yet it was barely mentioned. So what do we think?
I think from my point of view, I don't think you need to go into a huge amount of detail, right? Because normally you're having the teams are there, they're ready to go. You have maybe 3 or 4 minutes before you start because the stream doesn't start ages before the first match, right? You're kind of starting when the first match is almost going to start, right? So for me as a viewer, I would just want to hear, like, you know, this is the map they're playing on. These are the bands. These are some people to look out for. You know, these are some key players, and maybe a small bit of history on the team. So maybe 5-10 minutes. That's what I personally would want to see as a viewer perspective.
So I agree with you because I think it was have been done a little bit. It was maybe a little bit short for the storytelling about kebab versus pleb, but for the other match, for my part, when I was on it, we talk about the past of the teams. We say they win CBL, they win the previous CBL. We said it, but as you say, it's the game tournament, and it's made for people to be interested in tournaments. It don't have to be very accurate and very precise because you want a casual player to enjoy the tournament. They don't give a shit about the war story, about the life of each players one by one, what they are doing. You can say during the game he's playing exotics, he's playing the shield, or during the games, okay. But previous game, just say, okay, this team have done that. The other team have done that. So the captain, maybe you can say, oh, he have done do the past teams because it's important. But I don't want to spend a lot of time on it because you want viewer to be interested and don't leave it.
So if you were talking like pre-start stream game sort of thing scenario in the first place, I would think obviously starting out the first say the stream's just starting, and like we've obviously got everybody's all sitting there, casters, the my games team are sitting there speaking, and they have their little introduction, and then we're straight pretty much quite quickly into a game. But what I think if we had it, we actually had like proper like commentary sort of desk where they first off start off, that's when you can kind of speak about all the teams that are participating today. Like for example, you could do that as like a pre-hype to the battle starting, and then you have like a timer saying like the first match will start on this time or whatever, and we know that, and they can start the stream early enough that they kind of go through the build up. They can do all this thing where it's like, so we're going to have these matches coming up, you've got these, but obviously a little bit more in-depth talks rather than like them just saying, oh, we've got players versus kebabs coming up, we've got this coming up, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh, Fruit of the Casters, here we are. And, you know, we can have a build up. Like if we have previous knowledge of other tournaments and stuff like that, they can go back. If you had replays, other old clips from other battles, they can show them. So these are the guys, these have fought already against each other before, prior to in CBL 1, for example, or CBL 2. Then you can post all that. You can play all that on the stream, talk about a few things between certain players, individuals. Obviously not the whole team. You're not going to speak about the whole team because there's not enough time for all that. And some people, there's not really much notable things that need to be talked about unless they've done something major throughout the whole seasons and stuff. But prior to that, in between other pre-games, you don't really need as much in between after that if you've done all that prior to this the full thing starting. So if people want to tune in to listen to all the information about the teams and the previous things, obviously prior to the next game starting, if they fought in that match before, say we're going to Highland Ford for a game 2, they can say, oh, they've already fought on this match before, say a wee bit about that, and then it's like what potentially is going to happen for this matchup. Then you can speak about that, and you only need a short period of time. Obviously that falls into end game and pre-game. You're going to have that gap between game 1 and 2. So that'll kind of extend your time a little bit, and then that's the time that the teams have to prep for the next match.
I mean, I think, just correct me if I'm wrong here, but this is a difference with CB compared to other sort of e-tournaments that I've seen, is that with CB, the games have a set start time, right? Whereas I feel like with other e-tournaments, it's the stream will start at this time. There is no sort of set specific time where the game will start. Whereas with CB, they announce game 1 is going to start at 6 p.m. Game 2 is going to start at 7 p.m. The third matchup is going to start at 8 p.m. So you tune in at those times for those games. So if there's any delays, you're kind of like, well, you said the game was going to start now. Whereas if they just said the stream is starting now and teams have to be ready at this time, blah 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 in the background, but you could then have more flexibility with it, because it's not like, oh well, you told us the game was going to start now. And then also they don't have to just go, okay, well, we finished that round, now we have to wait 35 minutes for the next round to start. They could just naturally move into the next round. So just say, okay, teams, first game's going to start roughly this time, you need to be ready at this time. Second team at this time roughly, and we'll need to be going from that.
So the way League does it is it will say the stream will start at this time. Our estimated times for these games is this one.
Yeah.
If there's an event that means the series that's the best of 3 is done in 2 games, they then do have a bit of dead time. They'll say, right, we're just going to turn off the stream. We'll keep a countdown time going to when we'll reactivate the stream, and players know what's going on. When you tune in, you can see the result of the previous game. You know what to expect of the next one. Maybe make a PowerPoint presentation where you flick through some slides that give you some preamble, such as the players and their weapons. Like, that's all the information I'd want to really see.
If the weapons are right to the players.
Yeah, but that is actually quite an easy one to fix. Yeah. So we should be able to do that.
I agree. It could be great to get between the 2 matches, when you have several matches. When you get several matches on the same day, it would be great to have like say little PowerPoints with like 5 images with the teams gonna happen next. Because when you just have the waiting screen, you get nothing. It would be great to add it on the waiting screen, because they let a waiting screen because of the drops for every viewer to get the drops. But it would be great to get some information on it and people will be able to get them before we talk about it. So it will be less information to digest.
Even if it's just information of who won, right? Just have that on there so that people can tune in even if they're late and just see, oh, well, they won that. Okay, great.
Yeah, I was just about to say that. So like you says there, obviously with timings, if we said an estimated time for the first match to start, and then after that, it all just depends. There's no guaranteed time for set game 2 or set game 3, depending. It's all based on the first start estimated time. If we get everybody sorted and everybody's in the lobbies for the first game, but the estimated time is but the team leaders or the captains all know that you're going to start, say, at 6 o'clock, and then that is when the first match starts. After that, you've got the extended period, like the period after game and the start of game. There's always going to be a dedicated amount of time to that. So we know if the game finishes in 5-10 minutes instead of 30 minutes, then we're only going to have that same break time, and then we go straight into the second match, and then it'll speed up. Obviously, then that might mean after the series is done, and say there's another series to follow that, there will be an extended gap. But like you says, you left a screen on with like the previous matchup. You can have the scoreline on it. You can have a little box that's got the replays and the full matchup until it plays. If it's quite quick, speed it up or whatever. And then you can have obviously a wee bit more before you go to that, just about the analysis of the last game. And then that will slowly kind of speed up the time before the timer is, but always have a timer to indicate when the stream will start for the actual next match is up for the series.
So what could you guys have before it all starts that make that possible? Would it be a structure? Would it be some slides created previously or some templates to work from? Like what would you need for that to happen?
I think if we had previous knowledge of like matchups, or even the last matchup, if we were speaking about that, say it's a different caster setup coming in, because it's not always the same caster doing the same series. So like I'll do a series with Thorkell, say, and then it might be Nine Fingers and Coffee on the next matchup, but we don't have information from the previous games unless we sat and watched it ourselves. So it would be good if they had all the information that happened, like matches, maybe the stats screens, even that they could be shared to the next casters taking part of the next matchup. So they can kind of speak prior to their match starting about what just happened previously. They can speak about that in that little dead time, and then they can obviously move on to what potentially is going to happen for the next one.
But then is that, I'm just trying to think, I'm not trying to shit talk on here, but is that ownership more on you as a caster to have say you should watch the previous games, or should that be on my games where they should give you the rundown? Obviously we're talking about you guys doing this for free, so how much effort do you want to put in, but who should that ownership sit with, do you think?
Well, I was mainly meaning if it's in that same series, like say if it's in the same day and there's two matches in the same day, somebody's obviously dedicated time to cast that their time. So they might be doing other things prior to that to be able to not watch what's going on to the game before, because they've said, right, I'm available for this time because I'm doing other things out with that time. So they might not have time to watch the matchup before. So if it's in the same day, if it's say a couple of days later you're doing a cast, then you've got some point in between that to go back to look at a game prior to it, as long as you know what game you're casting. So if you know you're away to do No Beaches versus Plebs, and you noticed you can watch back a No Beaches game and a Plebs game prior to it, to kind of get information from that if you want to kind of experience it. And obviously that's on ownership of the caster. That is all down to how much they want to put in, and that will make a difference. But obviously the more dedicated streamers and casters you've got in there, the more time they're going to put into that if they want to do something for it, and obviously help progress the whole series and the whole CBL thing, or tournaments in general.
I think it would be great for the, like you say, Jai, the slide of a PowerPoint. It could be to get one to summarize what happened during the BO. Like you get who get this map, who get the other map in attack defense, we win this. What was the ban on it on only one screen? You do get it you get last match. It go to next match, what will be next match, but last match you get it when you look at a Valorant match. You get first map is it, second map is it, so exactly, you get who attack. It would be very good to get it. They just have to put a template to bring some images on it, and they have to prepare it before, and they can adapt after if they need, but it's never the same team playing the same night, so they can do it before. It will be very good. And even for the casters, as you say, you cannot watch the World Tournament for most of them, I think. You can just look at the summarize of what happened during the match. They win this map, and it would be very great for everybody.
It'd be great to have, say, like the top 3 scoring players on a team as well, like just a little screen grab of the top 3, so you can see like MVP of the previous game was this person, they played this weapon, yada yada.
I can't remember if it was CBL, but they did have a stats on like an Excel sheet that they were recording on certain things, but I don't think it was actually getting fulfilled as often as it should have. And the information was kind of like dead after like the first week or the second weeks. But that
got updated.
Yeah,
it did get updated.
I think people weren't referring back to that if they have the access to it then, because obviously some casts they were, some casts they might not have looked at it. And I think that's all ownership on Turrets and the casters. If it was getting updated, then obviously people weren't looking back at that to go, oh, by the way, this hero's he's a hero killer, as you can see by the stats here, for example. But I don't think it was literally just basic stats. It wasn't like certain like information that you might want to be able to share as well with like individual matches, if that makes sense.
It wasn't like Rivals, for example, where you had support score, hero kills, MVPs, all that kind of stuff. Because you got to give that to CB and the team on Rivals. They do a fantastic work with that Hall of Fame that they built, with the amount of stats that they actually keep track of. There have been some issues with it as they've been setting it up, and there's been a few little mishaps here and there. But overall, it's a fantastic thing to do there, and having that sort of extra like recognition, I guess, for players. They can, great, that season we may not have won, every game, or we may not have done this, but we had like 3 players in the top 10 of this stats or of these stats. Maybe not the deaths. You don't want the highest death count being the top, but it's also interesting to look at as a viewer as well. You can say, oh well, look, we look at MVPs, kills, support score. Look at the certain team names that you see in the top of all of those stats. Those are good teams, or this team has the highest deaths. Maybe they're not the best team, but maybe still won some games. So it shows a lot of interesting stats there. And definitely can be done more in CBL.
It comes down to a lot of time, though, as well, isn't it? Is that people having that time to do it, and that's the issue that you might have.
This is going to lovely lead me on to my final point, which is the amount of time you guys are putting in. My understanding is you did get a reward. We saw Coffee do his unboxing of his gauntleted mug. Do we think that the rewards that you guys got are fair? I'm going to relate this to being as a player, where the later into the competition you got more rewards. Was there something that the more casting you did, the more rewards, or the greater the reward you got, or was it just a blanket across for everyone?
So it was a blanket, which I think I said that as well. I think we were asked at one point if I said to them, I'm not really bothered by it. I do it on the fact I enjoy doing it, not because I'm looking for anything for it. Because I do it out of the fact that I like it, I just enjoy it, and obviously it's good for me as a name to kind of get my name on that, for potentially for me to kind of build my own like stream up in my own community and people to get to know me, etc. And stuff as well. But mainly it's because of the love of the game. But I says, yeah, if you want to do that, that's fine. But I did think that it'd be a bit unfair if one person casted one game and they got the same reward as me and Thorkell or so, and who probably casted like 5 or 6 different games, or maybe even more than that, depending on how long the games, how many games there was. Just like the guys that compete for the tournament, they're actually getting it based on where they positioned and how often well they did. And I also don't think we should have got the same as what a person that went on to do every single game and win every battle and win the tournament should have got the same as a caster. Like, I think it should have been different rewards. Per se, like the gauntlet obviously is fair enough, but there was nothing really there on the gauntlet to indicate that it was a caster. I could say that's a CBL winner now because it's the exact same as the other one. So there's no variation to what you guys got as a winner and what we got as a caster, really.
Yeah, I mean, I think just jumping on what you said there with sort of how many games you cast and different wars, I think that's a difficult one, though, right? Because how do they decide who casts what games? Isn't it just whoever's free? So is it then fair? Maybe someone says I'm free for the whole thing, but they only pick them for 2 games. And then someone else casts 6 games, and it's not their fault. They offered to do all of them, but they weren't chosen for it. So how would you balance that? Just playing devil's advocate, how would you balance that out?
I think that's on my games really, in terms of like who they picked for it. If everybody said they're available for every game and they gave somebody 5 games and one person 1 game, then that's on my games. There's nothing that we can do about it, obviously, if we're all available at that point in time. So obviously, granted, it's on your time, and if they're only available for certain ones, but there's certain people that were like, oh, I'm only available for the semi-final and the final. And I'm like, well, you missed every single lead up to it because there's lots of rounds prior to that. And I'm like, so to get the biggest games pretty much of the series into the whole big tournament, it would be a bit unfair for somebody to go in and go, I'm just going to rock up for the finals and stream the finals. Yeah. I've never watched or even know any knowledge of the whole season. So I think as a caster, if you've been taking part in the whole thing, then you should get priority to certain like matches, like the bigger matches at the end. But they say the bigger matches, obviously plebs and kebabs was at the very start, and that was a very, very big match. So, but like the finals and semi-finals, where you're going to get the biggest viewership probably from the whole tournament because it is the biggest teams and the best teams. So normally you'll get like that increased hike of like more viewership. But I think that should be on like my games. That should be split on an even basis.
That's definitely a good idea. I think maybe they could introduce something where if you want to cast the finals, you have to cast at least one matchup from every round beforehand, or something like that, so that it rewards the people that put in the work for it. As like you said, you get more out from casting the finals. You can get more viewership on your own channel because of that. You get your name out there more. But then it's also, maybe someone is on holiday for the first week, so they miss that. They can't. There's got to be some kind of human factor there as well, where you can be balanced with it. But talking about the rewards specifically, I think I don't know how much you guys can say, so I'm not going to go into details. But like the fact that you guys got the cup as a competitor, I don't think you should get the same rewards as a competitor as you do as a caster. And especially, like you said, the cup doesn't say anything on it. It just says Conqueror's Blade. So, like you said, you could just tell people, oh, yeah, I won with this, same as what the winner's got, Like, me as a winner, I want something that's special to me, And I don't know if this is true, but previous CBLs, people have said that the casters got the same skin as the winning teams and stuff as well. And, like, to me, that's just not right, Don't get me wrong, casters put in a lot of effort. They should get rewarded for their work as well. They could even have their own specific rewards that only they get. Like, even if it's a skinning game as well, they can get, that's fair enough. But I feel that they shouldn't get the same rewards as the competitors, as the winners.
I think they should get something slightly different because we do need to recognize that the game and the tournament cannot happen without them. And
100%.
when they do a great job, let's reward them.
Yeah, I agree. Like, we did get, obviously, you've got the Avatar, and we've obviously got CBL Caster 2023 or 2022 or whatever it was. You guys obviously got CBL Winner. That's the only variation I think that there was of the Avatar. But yeah, even if the cup was slightly different and there was a slightly different thing with reward for it, like things like that would be obviously different, like more specified towards being a caster, so that's for you. Like, I wouldn't even mind if you gave me like a trophy that looked like a mic, because we're speaking through a mics. Pretty much that's what we do. We're not fighting. We're not using, we're not needing like a winners tournament.
Even just a caster on there underneath, just
even caster would be fantastic. Caster 2022, or best caster MarkofGee.
As voted for by MarkofGee.
As voted by me.
I think it's difficult because I want it to avoid it just being a popularity contest where the biggest streamer gets the biggest one, because
100%.
some people are better suited to different roles. And we talk about Nine Figures. He has a lot of opinions about a lot of stuff, but he's also probably the closest thing we've got to a play-by-play right now. And his casting of that should be acknowledged. Like, he fits a role within the team, and it should be a finals team that's assembled and a semi-finals team. And the way people work together, like if you establish yourself as someone that works really well with another person, the two of you should go up. And it shouldn't just be, oh, that person was only available as a perfect pairing twice out of 6 games to therefore make the final. I think there needs to be the kind of like human element, and obviously a decision will have to be made as to who actually does the final games. And that's always going to be tough. But if it's done in a constructive way, just like, I
think if it's obviously if you're available for it in the first place, but if you obviously put your name forward for it, and then obviously they should then be like, right, you guys work best. They approach the people that they want to have first of all, and then see if they're available, etc. And then that's obviously down to that. But I think I agree that obviously the better synergy of a cast and a better flow that you're going to get, more knowledge and stuff for the finals would be fantastic to have, and have it kind of more of a hype behind that as well for the finals. But
why don't they have like an analyst desk? So the casters that were doing the in-game stuff could then genuinely go and have a break, and then some of the other really successful casters from the earlier rounds then get to do a bit of the analysis where they get to dive into the stats and say, this was my favorite part, because they're going to see things as a viewer, and they're going to be then relating to the viewer experience a lot more than the casters who might have a separate camera view.
Mm-hmm. True. I think
that would be an option.
Yeah, that could be an option. It's also, like we says, if everybody's available for that and can take part, it's all about that. But timing is crucial for most people, I think, to be available to do all these sort of things. And obviously, if we're getting rewarded in a way for it, it's always a benefit for them to be kind of more inclined to do it. And that's why if you're making yourself available for more time, then there should be a difference in like what you get out of it, rather than.
I mean, also another example is 2 people cast the first 2 games, another 2 come in for the second 2 or second 4, and do it that way. Do it so it spreads out the load, so that everyone that did contribute then gets that final hype experience for themselves.
If I'm not wrong, at the beginning there were like 16 or 32 slots of matches, and we were like 8, so we were supposed to do like 4 matches each. But it finished like some did less and some did more. But at the beginning it was like I think they don't say we're supposed to do 4, but we are 8 casters, so logically we're supposed to do 4 each. But I don't agree dividing the function of what you're doing in casting, because how will you evaluate it? Or will you evaluate the quality of the casting of someone? It's not very fair for the people who have a more difficult, less time. I don't mind if I get less, I get the same reward of someone like did to cast, don't prepare for it, and if I made feedbacks and I get the same thing, it's fine. I get the title of the casting in game. I get my cup. I get the same stuff of everybody. It's fine. I participate to it. I don't need to have more rewards on it because we don't get any money, so it won't change. If there were money, well, yes, maybe if I spend more time, I can get money. But like here, you were just doing it for the passion, most of them. So we get a reward just to get a reward, and it's fine. On the point you said before for the player and the caster reward, it was a fight that in the last CBL, I heard players from French community saying to me it's a shame that casters got the same title, the golden title, they got the same thing as them, winning the tournament. And I've been one of the people saying to Drew, I seen them multiple times. We should not have the same rewards as the players because it's not respectful. They spend like 4 days or weeks screaming every week. They're spending way more time than us. Some of them doing at like impression. They don't do anything else outside else than working and sleeping, having family. And we'll get the same thing as them. It's really not fair. So I'm very happy that they give us different rewards.
Yeah, in regards to that, yeah, you're like right. Obviously, players and teams obviously put in like all that effort in the background for prior to their tournament starting, their scrims and their practice sessions that they're putting in as well. Some casters though might do some of that stuff in the background as well. They might be looking back at previous matches. But we obviously don't know. Like I've done that in past. I watch streams of other casters when they're playing their matches and stuff, just so I'm watching and know what's going on, so I can speak about it in my next matchup, for example. But some people might do that. So like, it's all on their basis as well. So we don't know what they're doing in the background. It's like just like we don't know what the other teams are doing in the background. Some teams scrim, some teams don't do it. Some teams will just turn up and play and just hope that their synergy and their teamwork that they use from out playing the game on a general basis will help them to obviously progress themselves. And just think they're just doing it for fun as well, some of them as well. So it will always depend on like how much, because they're not getting money for it and they're not getting like technically a payment for it. There is no ownership on how much time you put in it. It is down to the individuals.
Yeah. Right. On that note, I think we have talked about a ton of stuff, and it's worth summarizing, or even just highlighting what we think are the key aspects that need to change, what we like and what we don't like. So starting with, let's start with a change with Temple. Temple, what do you like about the current casting experience? What do you not like, and what do you think should be the highest priority?
I think one of the things I like at the moment is just how inclusive. Not is it inclusive? That's the word. How open it is to everyone. There's so many people involved. It's so diverse, the casting experience at the moment. There's so many accessible. Is probably the word I'm looking for. So it's so accessible for players to come in, for people just to get involved. I've had some really fun experiences casting with many different people already, even just doing from rivals. That's one thing that I really like. At a base level, it is easy to get into. If you want to be good at it, then you need to put in a lot of work. You need to know the game, all that kind of stuff as well, which is fine. But at a base level, it's easy to get into. What I think can be improved with it, if we're talking about CBL, obviously is getting the players, getting the casters involved more with the production team. Having that a better involvement so you can improve that process for everyone, for the viewers, for the participants, for the casters. That's something that needs to happen. And it's a running theme we've had through this whole podcast. It's just get the players or the community involved in the backline processes more. So I think that's it for me.
Thorkell, what do you think?
I'm thinking that the tournaments are today. CB Rivals is very good because it's a community one. So CB is listening very well to community feedbacks to improve the tournament each time, to improve the way it's making the ban, all the stuff. And from the caster point of view, it's pretty enjoyable because, as you say, beginners can go and cast the second division if they want. There is no problem. It's open to people. You can cast in every languages. I'm casting in French all the time because I would like to create content for French people. For the CBR, I cast in English because it's a main tournament, it's an official one. But I've cast all the match of the CBR because I cast all the match I wasn't on CBR on my channel for the French people. And casting is a way, I think, to understand the game, because you force yourself to understand the game. You force yourself to understand the world of every players, what they're supposed to do. If you would like to enjoy the game, you really understand a lot of things that you don't understand just playing the game, doing siege, doing ranked. You don't understand all those aspects. That's very important, and it's very helpful. And I think it's a very good human experience too, because you will have to cast with other people. And I really invite everybody to try it if they love the game. It's a very good experience. And from the CBL, as we said, I think it was a long time. They don't do any CBL before, so there is some preparation missing. But they were listening to the feedback during CBL. I hoping they will remember what we said, and they will keep being following the feedbacks and being reactive. They are doing very good improvements in general, even for the content creator stuff, to listen people, I think, to improve the game in general, because they're listening everybody. The game is going in a good way, I think, in general. And I think in tournament, I hope it will be the same thing, and I hope we won't wait too long to get another CBL, because it will be sad.
Mark?
Yeah, I agree with all these points there said as well. I think getting into the whole casting side of things in general, if you wanted to do it, there's plenty of options there for anybody to do it. It's really fun, and that's the reason I kind of do it. And obviously, the love of the game, and obviously the funness that it comes, and the excitement you get to watch other players playing the game. I think for the most part, all these even communities that have been making their own individual tournaments, whether it's deathmatch tournaments, whether it's full on like 5v5 fights and stuff like that, even interception fights that they'll do in tournament fights in previous. And then you've obviously got the CB Rivals, which is one of the more series that's kind of gone on for a good amount of time now. And obviously that's going to get more people involved in the players, more people involved in the game, because they enjoy that whole competitive side of the game. And that's where it gets really interesting and fun for everybody. I think if you want to get involved, definitely you enjoy it. CBL is obviously going to get better as long as they kind of keep taking on what everybody else is saying with the community. And if we always get that progression, it's going to get bigger and better, and hopefully that makes the game last longer and longer for the rest of us to all enjoy it and have spent thousands and thousands of hours of their life playing. And I'm pretty sure Tempo's thousands of hours just keeps getting higher and higher. You might just be AFK in this city though for most of the time because he's TW calling. But but yeah, I think it's been a fantastic experience for me, and I've loved every single minute of it as well. So
yeah, get the players involved, get the community involved. Where
definitely
people are desperate to help. Right. Starting with you, Thorkell, where can people find you? Social media, streaming services, and things like that.
On Twitch, on Thorkell TV, like you say in English. I say Thorkell, so it's not the same thing. Yes, on Twitch only. Streaming most of the day. I'm streaming multi-gaming, so I'm not only playing Conqueror Blades, but if people come and say, it's better because there is not a lot of people outside Conqueror Blade, because I spend my life playing Conqueror Blade. So, and on tournaments on CBL Rivals FR too. On CBL Rivals FR, if you would like to watch some tournaments in French, we got very good casters like Machine and Arcanop that are very, very technical. That explains very well the game. And sometimes I invite you, if you would like to see tournament, to subscribe to this, to follow this channel more than mine, the CBL Rivals FR, because I'm multi-gaming, so I'm not playing only Conquer Blade. But CBL Rivals FR it's really done to cast first division of CBL Rivals, to cast other tournaments on Conquer Blade. Even CBL Asia have been cast on it in French, so it's very interesting.
I pop in sometimes watch you play Warhammer as well.
Fun games.
Mark, what about you?
Yeah, you can find me over on twitch.tv/MarkofGee. As always, I've not been as regular, sadly, because of baby, but not sadly at the same time because it's my baby. So it's always a good thing. But yeah, you'll see me there when we eventually kind of get back to doing it, and hopefully see me back casting whatever's next, any tournaments that I may be asked to take part in, and obviously CBL for sure.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, gents. Our next episode is with Super Kidowitch, I think, and we're going to go into the numbers and the background behind Conqueror's Blade that most people do not know, but he's done a lot of work into.
The numbers, Mason, what do they mean?
What do they mean? Right. Thanks so much, everyone, and see you next time.
Thank you very much.
Bye.